Good evening, everyone. It is now 6 p.m. on November the 14th, and this is the City Council Work Session coming to order. Let's do the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Kyle, will you be taking the roll?
Yes. Councilmember Frank Bankert. Can you hear us?
Yeah, he's muted.
I'm not seeing him. Oh,
My apologies, Mr. Mayor. Can you hear me now?
Sure can.
Okay. Councilmember Frank Bankert's here via Zoom. Councilmember Leslie Nataro,
here,
Councilmember Lloyd Roberts,
Here.
Councilmember Mike Zabel. Here. Vice Mayor Jody Shirley,
here,
Mayor Dave Gaddis. Here. Interim City Manager Kyle Riefler, here. City Attorney Randy Mora.
Present.
Thank you very much, Mr. Riefler. We'll just go ahead and get started with item number 1, which is discussion of proposed ordinance regarding comprehensive sign regulations. This was placed on the agenda by Interim City Manager Riefler. Take it away, sir.
Okay, so this is our ordinance that City Attorney Mora has drafted up. He went through it, and he can explain more than I can, where he added highlighted sections of the areas of possible areas you might want to change as far as the layout of the ordinance. Do you want to expand on that?
Sorry, 1 second. I'm just, forgive me for a moment. I just want to make sure I'm looking at most recent, as it's been a moment since I transmitted this. Oh, sorry, the sign code. Yes. So with the sign code drafts, there's a lot here. It's not lost on me that it's lengthy. It's much lengthier than anything I've sent you in the past or likely will send you. This conforms to what we've done in a lot of other communities as proposing this. In the draft that I transmitted to Mr. Riefler, and I believe as it was communicated to you, there are several portions that are highlighted in yellow. These are it's your policy call. Here's a number, any number. If 24 inches isn't the number you want, make it 26, make it 38. I don't care. But it's really this is where the policymaker's role is at its heaviest. What we have here in the sign code, and I've circulated some of the case law in the past. I know to Ms. Natero directly, I can't remember if I sent it to each of you, but as I was interviewed, and in the time since I've been interviewed, we brought up, what about our sign code? What about our sign code? This has sort of been a point of concern for us in our community for some time. In 2015, the Supreme Court, I believe it was during the 2015 term, might have been 2014, passed or issued a decision in a case called Reed v. Gilbert out of Arizona. And with Reed v. Gilbert, the holding of that case was such that we cannot regulate signs, or sign regulations must be content neutral. And so the traditional model of, well, if it's a real estate sign, we can do this. If it's a political sign, we can do this, especially as it relates to temporary signs. It has to be content neutral. So we don't look to what it says. If it says vote for Randy, or join the Komen for the Cure walk, or the chili cook-off, or come stay here, we can't really regulate that. We can regulate size, dimensions, placement, etc., time, place, manner restrictions, as you might refer to them in free speech regulation. But temporary signage has to be regulated uniformly. And so with a lot of communities that have looked at these sign code amendments, and this would ultimately also go through your P&Z and back to you again in the form of an ordinance, where the sticking points have been in some communities have been on, for example, the number of signs allowed in a yard. It might sound crazy to you to say we should allow 6 signs in a yard. But remember, when it comes election season, if somebody wants to support for review, a ballot measure and the president, there's 6 right there. And so, but that number is that number, whether they're political signs or something, or just go with God and be kind today, and put that in your front, whatever somebody wants to put. It's content neutral temporary signage, and there's this, restrictions on size and placement. The other thing that's very different about this ordinance, just from the jump, the first several pages are whereas clauses, exordial clauses, findings. I know as politicians, you don't love, and I'm not using that term derisively, but as the legislators, you don't always love, I find legislators don't always love all these findings being in there. This is to substantiate an ever evolving area of the law. And yes, we considered it, and if challenged, yes, we considered it. Yes, this is how we reconciled it. This is how we arrived here. There's been some more recent case law in the last 2 terms, not necessarily specific to Reed v. Gilbert on temporary signs, but more to municipal regulation. In Florida, we have a scheme where we're already regulate off-site advertising, for example. I'm going to have a sign here for the bait and tackle shop way over there. And so, but as drafted, this already addresses that. I can, while I have sort of a broad-based summary, because of its length, the idea was first to give this to you folks as, hey, we have work product, we are moving forward. Is there anything that is very specific to your community that this isn't addressing, or you say, hey, there's a lot here, I'm not sure it addresses this, but as we move forward, I want to make sure A, B, and C are handled. But again, I'm not looking, one, with this being a workshop, I'm not looking for, and we will pass this tomorrow, but are we moving in the right direction? And if not, why not? What can we do to address, resolve, continue to move forward? So with that, it's, I know there may be some inclination as you look at this to say, we have 2 zoning districts, this can't be that hard. It's residential and another form of residential. But what we also try to do is say, what are the issues in other communities, and make sure this is really closer to an insurance policy of regulation, that we're not wondering how do we regulate it when something shows up. We already know how off-sign signs are addressed, how illuminated signs are addressed, how, snipe signs or whatever, every kind of lollipop sign, whatever the things we've seen in other communities. And no, I'm not making these words up. They're in there. But knowing how we're going to address them rather than, well, we don't have any of those, so that's not a problem here. Well, yet. And so that's why it's drafted as robust as it is, with the informed by the lessons learned in other communities where we have proposed and advanced these drafts.
The first thing that I would like to say about this is this will probably be the most expensive ordinance that we've ever done.
Right.
Because we're paying for your time. God only knows what it's going to cost to advertise this. This is multiple pages of a newspaper. And then, of course,
Well, we don't have to publish the whole ordinance. We publish just the title, but I do agree with you. It's a long title.
it's a lot. And then also the Muni code. I don't know what it costs per page to add this, but it's going to be very, very expensive. But it is something that we need. I think the last time we even attempted this, it was nowhere near 45 pages, and we were still overwhelmed with the volumes of information that we had in front of us. Jody?
Well, I agree. It's something we need to get back in place. It is a lot of material to go through.
No doubt.
Yeah. And, I've been thumbing through it since we received it, and I'm not sure that I'm completely following it. Maybe we just need a quick lesson on what are the highlights sort of thing, because all the whereas clauses, don't, that's law, and it's not something that I'm versed in, and I don't, it's a tough, it's tough for a layman to read, right?
Agreed.
But, maybe it would be helpful. I know you highlighted just some sizes of lettering, temporary banner information, things like that, Florida statute. But what would you say we should focus on when we're reviewing this?
All of it? No, I really think that the point of attention should be, what numbers are you, as it relates to temporary signs, what numbers are you okay with on on properties,
Mhm.
their dimensions. Looking to the extent you don't really have commercial districts, but to the extent you have things that like, well, that's always been a fixture of the community. Are you worried about? And again, less relevant here, but in other communities, hey, we've always had the Eat at Joe's sign and it looks like this, and how's the Eat at Joe's sign fit into this? Those sorts of the things that are specific to your community is really where I think the attention should go. I hear you on the length of it, and while I wouldn't say that none of it could be pared down, this is a very rare instance. Most of the time, as you're making policy, I'm not coming to you and saying, you need to pass this ordinance.
Right.
Here's an ordinance you should consider. I'm doing this in response, or we are doing this in response to Supreme Court jurisprudence, which is somewhat ever changing. I went to a conference just this summer. It's like, here's the court sort of new shades we think based on recent Supreme Court case law. And so what we're trying to signal is we're likely, if we're going to see a challenge to something, this is the kind of thing we're likely to see it to. And I want to make sure that I'm giving you all the fodder to say, if we're going to go through the effort of adopting this, just debating it, discussing it, that I make it defensible.
Right.
And I'm not asking that you internalize and understand every single whereas clause. What I think I think that tonight should be the first in a series of discussions about this. This should be broaching that discussion and saying, well, here's the other part of this is, in addition to it being top down in terms of here's the Supreme Court, city attorney, give us something to work with. Beyond saying, Randy, we need something to work with. We haven't had a workshop on signs before.
Right.
In my tenure. I know that there's been discussions in the past. So I'm sort of going in tabula rasa, blank slate. Here's something. If this isn't what you had in mind, by all means, please tell me. Obviously, I work at your pleasure.
Right.
If this is too much, fine. We'll figure out how we pare it back. If it's not addressing the particular ills that we're concerned about in this community, then let's make sure it does. But given that this was sort of we need something to work with, here's everything. Here's the whole buffet, right? And the list, for example, of prohibited signs is lengthy.
Right.
It captures almost every iteration of something that isn't what you would ordinarily see. If you don't want to list that robust, fine, understand that, okay, that'll shorten it substantially. But then we are maybe leaving some question marks on what can and can't people do, and what license will people take. And I'm not saying that's where you were focused, but
Well,
to me, I don't know that given its length and given that we haven't had a discussion prior to its presentation to you about what we did and didn't want, it is not my advice to you tonight and give me this and we'll come up on first reading.
mhm.
This is, let's start the discussion with something to work with. I don't think we need to workshop this for the 90 minutes of tonight. I don't know that that's going to be productive given where our level of understanding is. If you want more synthesis, that's understandable and reasonable, and I can give that. It was hard for me to say, here's exactly what we're focused on beyond hearing a little bit of, we had this one thing 3 years ago and we had this other thing, and trying to get that into, and now I know I've met my client's needs.
Well, here's my dilemma, is why it definitely needs to be moved forward, is we've had, although we say we have we only have residential properties, we have the Bel Air Beach Hotel, which got a quite large pole sign that was lost during the storm. Is that permitted in our current code? Of course, we don't even have a sign code.
Basically
So
silence of function.
So what happens? How do we permit that when they go to replace it? And they're going to, right? Is that even something that we want to see in our city? Is it going to be this big illuminated, pole sign, which they can hang a box and go back to what they had, and it could be illuminated and
Well, and I can tell you, as it relates to a particular property or property owner, anybody who's applying right now is applying under your current code. We can't say that something we might maybe do in the next 5 or 6 months
I know.
is binding. And I know you guys appreciate that. I want to say that
Mhm.
just for clarity in the record. If something were to pass tomorrow, that's not a failure of this body in the here and now because we didn't do something tonight.
Mhm.
Your code is your code as it sits tonight, and this isn't something that we even have. We're close enough to say like, okay, everybody was reasonably on notice of precisely what was being adopted. I will tell you that in as much as while you're generally residential, one of the reasons more time was put into this draft, and a colleague of mine who's also a city attorney in other beach communities principally drafted this, Rob Eschenfelder in my office with my insights and collaboration. I will tell you that one of the things is like, I see that they're two districts, but they do have pseudo commercial uses, and I need to be sensitive to that in the draft and make it more robust than just homes.
Right.
And so we did have an eye towards that in our draft, specifically discussed it, the timeshare hotel element of what you kind of sort of have. And so that's another concern of ours, is saying, while we may not necessarily anticipate the use proliferating, people didn't anticipate vacation rentals operating as they do today. And so we want, and I'm not saying this is specific to that, I just give that as an example because it's on the brain for other reasons. Just, with that, but one of the questions I have for you folks, in terms of this open dialogue is, were there concerns, not that whether they were addressed or not, were there concerns that you have that you want to say, like, as we move through this, I want to make sure we are dealing with X, Y, or Z, or resolving ABC in our community, because that's also helpful for me to know what your concerns and your constituencies' concerns are about signs.
Let me go to Mr. Bankert. He's had his hand raised for a while now.
Actually, it's a computer, Dave, so I didn't have it up. But anyway, I believe Justice Thomas wrote the majority opinion in Reed Gilbert. And he clearly says that town may go a long way towards entirely forbidding the posting of signs, so long as it does so in an even-handed, content-neutral manner. So I cannot see how I think you pointed out, Mr. Mayor, the last proposal Mr. Riley gave us was like 27 pages. I think this is like 35 or 30 some pages. I couldn't stomach that one. I'm not degrading you, Mr. Moore, at all or whatever. I mean, you're giving us, a sign ordinance, but wouldn't it be better if we said on the east side of Goff Boulevard, we take Justice Thomas's language, no signs. West side of Goff Boulevard for the commercial businesses, the condos, we have some type of strategy of signs, and be done with this nonsense, or just put the old sign ordinance back, which is a couple pages long. I mean, this is just beyond ridiculous. It's going to cost us a fortune, like you said, Mr. Mayor, and publicizing it. This is just bad. I think any attorney that looks at this will be salivating, because anytime something's written long, there's ways to bring you to court and scrutinize the whole ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you. I think the reason why we're going through this exercise is because our existing ordinance was written wrong, was written poorly. Mr. Zabel, you had a comment?
Yeah, I want to bring this up. You would think with our type of city, it'd be no problem, but we got two sitting council members that are being sued. We have public citizens that are being sued for something that is frankly in the exercise of their position. This is a litigious society. And frankly, I would put our attorney up against any other attorney that lives here in this city. You need to be very, very specific. Do not be, dollar wise, pound foolish. We must get this done correctly. I really do appreciate what's been done here. My way forward, I propose is, I like this as a start. You definitely, this has got to look at every contingency which he has done. Yeah, attorney is salivating, fine, knock yourself out, but we've done our diligence to protect the city, because this would rip the city apart. Next is the potential pathway. Yeah, this is a lot to swallow in the first reading. And he said, we're starting the process. Great idea. If we can just get a general idea going for educate, but turn it over to, the various committee that can actually get into the weeds, and they have the time and the inclination where they can review this more thoroughly. We have not only this, but we have buoys, we have finances, budgets. We do have a lot on our plate, and to keep it manageable, recommend that they do a thorough review. And then we all meet again with Attorney Moore to really, fine tune the areas that we can work on. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Leslie, do you have any comments?
I'm amazed. I mean, I've read legal briefs that don't have as much citation as this thing does.
Agreed.
Question, Scenic America Inc. I'm on page 9. Whereas the city recognizes that Scenic America, Inc. recommends improvements in the scenic character of a community. What is that?
I hear the question. It is I will tell you that it is a non-governmental organization, right?
Yeah.
That has opinions on these things. And you like saying perhaps AAA or something of the sort. Well, what we're trying to do is say that we have looked when in justifying municipal enactments and in articulating a rational basis, the city need not engage its own studies and efforts to adopt measures. It can say, look, other entities have looked at this issue and this is what they have opined, and we find those findings relevant for our purposes. I'm not, candidly, I'm not in a position to tell you this is how they're incorporated in their history and in their structure and their relationship, but it is certainly an entity with interest in the aesthetics of municipalities and our, communities, and look to for that purpose.
This is an amazing, an amazing ordinance. Last time we did something on city signs, we brought in sample signs. Here's one that's X by X feet. I'm assuming there's somewhere in the in the closet here somewhere, so that we could take a look at, how big should we allow these signs to be? You know what I'm talking about,
Yes.
or where they may be hiding, or
I don't know if I can locate the old ones, but it wouldn't be hard to remake samples. Definitely visuals for you guys to look at.
And again, as this is drafted, it has placeholders for dimensions. This was dimensions to me, this is sort of like the equivalent of if you're building new construction. You folks are going to need to make decisions about the finishes.
Yeah.
What's this going to look like, but we need the structure first. And so this is absent any input on structure. Here's the most robust version we can do. Once I have your input, I of course will adapt it to what this community wants. I want to be very clear that the 7 or 6 of you are the policymakers, not the city attorney. I would not have it that you adopt something simply because the city attorney said we needed to, and so this is what we did. That doesn't mean you need to intellectualize every single facet, but this is ultimately going to be your work product. And if you don't like the work product, I appreciate that feedback. Let me know. Again, we were starting sort of from zero to make sure we have something to work with, and it's easier to subtract from with precision than to add to with ambiguous desire. And so that's, in my estimation, where we are on this. I want to be very clear. I take no offense to constructive criticism aimed at a better product.
So what you've given us, one second, Mr. Roberts, what you've given us is you've given us a generic document that whatever numbers we plug in anywhere we see a yellow highlight, it's a one size fit all. It's just, what do we want? And we plug those numbers in.
It's generic, but it's generic grounded in your community. It was drafted with attention to what your zoning districts are, what the history of your, the whereas clauses go to the year you were adopted, not just like, whereas in X, you did Y. It is already drafted to fit this community, but yes, it is, here's by and large how we've done this in other communities. And it's not a one size fits all, because ultimately you make it fit yourself. There's other communities that we've done a draft, another community I work in that has a draft that they're workshopping right now. And at the end of it, there's a whole chart on sign sizes and zoning districts. That's because their current code has that, and they want that chart. Yours doesn't have that. We're not going to create a chart just because theirs had it doesn't mean yours needs to. And so we did try to make it align, while it may not mirror what you currently have. In as much as one of you has suggested, why don't we just eliminate sides on one side? I want to be very clear. If you're doing that, you're saying there's no signs of, if one of you runs for office tomorrow and you live on the east side or whatever that side that is, there's no political sign. There is no real estate sign. There is no signs allowed in the community if that's the prohibition. This as Justice Thomas's opinion is written, it severely curtailed that. Now the court has since retreated a little bit from that very restrictive read of Reed v. Gilbert to say, well, you got to have the ability to regulate somehow. We're not going to get into, if Eda Joe's offsite is the same thing, but ultimately I will defer to what policy directions you want to move and provide you the analysis on what is or is not permissible in that regard.
Boy,
Yeah, so Randy, earlier you mentioned that there were some other towns or cities along possibly Gulf Boulevard, excuse me, that are similar with this type of a document. Is that accurate?
I am the city attorney in the city of Indian Rocks Beach. I've provided their manager and management team a draft similar to this. I just
Okay.
had a meeting with them 10 days ago to talk about, or something like that, to talk about line edits and drafts, and we're putting it before their P and Z. I know we've provided similar drafts in the city of Tarpon Springs and the city of Dunedin. I don't know if those got enacted. I just asked my colleague where those stand. So I don't know which ones have gotten to adoption versus which are in process. But I will tell you that when Reed came out in 2015, there were probably 2 firms, 5 lawyers who were being contracted with throughout the state to draft because nobody really was willing to wade into those waters confidently. And a lot of people were looking to a couple attorneys. One of them, unfortunately, had health issues. And rather than keep telling our clients, well, this is the person, you need to use them, we got the competency and looked at what their drafts are and tried to conform to where the direction of the law is going. Your ordinance was all those whereas clauses were revisited to make sure the case law is current as of the draft you were provided. This is not just like, well, we drafted and we're sure it's fine. We're looking at it. I don't love giving you guys, I don't believe in using 5 words when you can use 2. This isn't representative of that, and I recognize that. We are in what I would call a fluid legal jurisprudential area. And I want to make sure that if you're going to go through the effort of adopting it, that it's defensible, researched, and articulated that we did have a basis for going in the direction we did. Yes, we saw those case law decisions, and yes, this is still where we want to go and ultimately see. But again, I have to emphasize, you folks are the policymakers.
Mhm.
If you don't like it, tell us.
Yeah, I'm actually a big believer in more detail, because I would like to have a document to where we would minimize any opportunity, if possible, to where somebody says, well, you really don't say in here what I'm dealing with.
Yeah.
So anything that we can put in there on a much smaller scale, when I was dealing with rules for a softball league, when I was in Lutz, that was my goal. So nobody could say, well, this is unique. You don't really address it in the rules. I want to avoid that every way possible.
And we've endeavored to do that. I will tell you that invariably somebody will find that thing that you
course.
never anticipated.
Right.
This is not without its flaws. It was still written by people. So it has flaws, I'm sure. And again, in as much as those flaws are things that you folks can't countenance, please let us know.
Okay. Just one quick question, just because I was having trouble visualizing it on page 13
Yes,
at the bottom, which is the calculation of a double-faced sign. So a double-faced sign, my first time I read that, I thought front and back, but I don't think that's what it's saying. A double-faced sign shall be calculated in the area of one face only. Double-faced signs shall be constructed that the perimeter of both faces coincide and are parallel and are not more than 24 inches apart.
I understood it to be like a box. Our signs are like double-sided. But now
Correct.
you got two sheets of plexiglass, one side here, one side here, and in between is just a giant box full of lights.
Right?
And so you're at 24 inches now, but what if you wanted to make this really huge one that was 6 foot in depth,
Right.
but the face are within the regulation?
Correct. So they're saying 2 feet apart, the 24 inches is the maximum.
Yeah, the 2 sheets.
Has
of
nothing to do with top and
plexiglass.
bottom 24 inches,
no,
just like
no.
this. Okay,
It's-
got
it's-
it.
It's what members able was
Okay,
explaining.
awesome. Yes, I don't think there's a tremendous, if we want to say that we're fairly comfortable with this, for lack of a better term, like a boilerplate here. But we want to go through and address those highlighted areas where there's dimensions and days and times and things like that. I don't think it's a huge amount of work to go through there and identify those that have already been identified. But for us to kind of say, well, we think 24 inches is too far apart. We want it to be 12 inches.
Right.
And we go with that.
Precisely. And just using that one as a limited example and the
Sure.
size of yard signs and each community is different and I,
Okay.
as a firm believer in home rule, want to make sure you're capturing what makes sense in your community.
I'm curious, the dimensions that are plugged in, were old dimensions reused as much as possible?
That's my recollection of that. In as much as a code presently regulated, it was, here's what it presently says. That's how we typically try to do it. Because I'm operating on dual tracks of sign codes at the moment in my head. I'm here in another community. I'm
Sorry.
having a little hard time recalling which one was which way, but yes, ordinarily when we do it where there was an existing number, we tried to keep it.
So you didn't charge us 100% for the effort for two cities, right?
No, sir. That's not how
So
I
we-
operate.
Okay, we shared the cost on this one.
I refer to that as bulk pricing.
That's
I think
right.
That's what we got.
And I just want to say, we probably should make sure you read everything thoroughly,
Yeah.
because there is a prohibited sign that is talking about vehicle signs, and all I can think of is a construction vehicle. And it says, the vehicle visible from the street or right of way within 100 feet of the vehicle, where the vehicle's parked for more than 2 consecutive hours in a 24-hour period. So I'm just thinking, any construction worker, side of the van's painted, they're gonna be there all day working. It's gonna be parked more than 24 hours, if I'm reading this correctly. I'm just kind of scanning through, circling some
dumpster.
things. Yeah, just some things like that, that
Yeah.
would probably, you know, just make sure that we're not being unreasonable either.
Yeah, definitely read the whole thing, sure.
Well, obviously, this is a lot of information that we have to sort through, and we need to make our own recommendations and come back for another meeting on this. This is a great start. Ultimately, I wouldn't mind it going to the Citizens Advisory Committee once we'll do it backwards this time. We'll make recommendations and pass it off and let the Citizens Advisory Committee look it over and make recommendations.
In my recollection, based on its placement in your code, I believe it would also go before your planning and zoning board as well. If you wish to send it to CAC, that's, I think your guys' rules on that are discretionary, but just to be advised that another board will look at it.
The more eyes it goes in front of, the better
Sure.
I will feel. Any other comments about this sign ordinance?
Thank you.
Mr. Bankard?
No, I've said my piece. I think we should go with what Mr. Thomas wrote.
All right, thank you very much. With that being said, we will move on to item number 2, which is discussion of draft employment agreement for the services of Kyle Riefler as city manager. And this was placed on the agenda by, I'm assuming, Mr. Mora.
Happy to be the person who's placed it there, in as much as I said, so let me just pull up my email on that one moment, please. So about a little less than 2 weeks ago, I sent to you folks on November 2nd, I sent to you folks an email detailing here's the draft that I had provided Kyle, here's the draft that Kyle provided with his insights. Kyle and I had the clear line of communication, emphasizing that I am here as counsel for the city and its commission or council, and he was free to get whatever other advice and insights he wished. He took the time, carefully reviewed it, provided another draft. In addition to providing those two drafts, my email included a bulleted summary of notable terms, contract terms, salary, health, medical, dental, life insurance, annual vacation leave, et cetera. This draft was not, on my end, not done from scratch, as of course we had negotiated extensively with another candidate and ultimately did not reach mutually agreeable terms. That fact notwithstanding, some of the more substantive changes as it relates to Kyle from the draft that you'd last seen was the leave component. This body had deliberated about leave for the prior candidate and concluded that they wished that you did not want to have a distinction between annual leave, sick leave, et cetera. Just here's your leave, use it as you wish. Kyle, having been an employee of the city for several years now, has accrued leave. And as a general ethos, and Kyle, you can correct me if I'm speaking out of turn here, as a general ethos in his notes to me, said, I generally wish to be treated more like another employee than not, I still have his contract, but if this is how we administer benefits to employees, by and large, he preferred that model than creating some kind of special regime just for his purposes. And so With that in mind, that's where you'll see some of the more notable differences, annual vacation leave, sick leave. The salary number, I did not have a specific negotiating range. I was mindful of what ranges you talked about in some of the marketing before, and some of the numbers that have been bandied about, and also mindful of where Mr. Riefler is presently on his compensation. I threw out a number with not with specific guidance of 95,000. Mr. Riefler countered with it being graduated 5% at different times. Mr. Riefler, as he and I discussed that, explained, well, he'd much rather have a number and also just have track the 3% subject to your approval that you generally have been giving, or whatever your cost of living adjustments you make year over year for your employees, that it would be equally extended to the manager. In that case in mind, there would be years where he didn't get an increase. Otherwise, I'm happy to answer any questions, but I think it's been laid out in a way that's concise enough to be digested.
Since Mike Zabel made the motion to move forward on this, I would like for him to make the first comment.
Yeah, I'd like to go back to salary. Obviously, this has the initial at 115. What is the current salary right now with that additional kicker that we had voted in currently?
His current.
I just need to know the baseline.
Yeah, my recollection was the baseline is presently around 92 to 93. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Now,
Current with his previous title plus the $1,000 or whatever it was addition, if made annual, it would be 92 to 93. And I did ask these questions to the finance director, Heather Guadagnoli. So let me just call up that email if you don't mind, so I can speak to some of that. I asked her to identify the total value of Kyle's annual salary before receiving additional compensation as interim manager. It was $65,251.42. I asked her to identify the total of Kyle's annual salary after receiving additional compensation, and it was $91,251.42, which is roughly a $26,000 annual increase. I asked to identify the dollar value of Kyle's present total annual compensation, salary, and benefits, and adding in pension contributions, health insurance, etc. His total compensation presently was at $115,618.62, with dental and vision, car allowance, pension, health insurance, and the life insurance policy that the city has. I asked to confirm whether Kyle presently receives his health insurance through the city or receives the flat rate $600 a month payment. And she said the $600 a month payment with a total of $7,200. Confirm whether Kyle is presently subject to the paid and sick leave provisions in the personnel manual. Yes, standard accruals as a present employee. And confirm the nature and quantum of the city's retirement plan contributions for Kyle presently. It is a 10% pension contribution through the Florida Municipal Pension, not yet fully vested based on general employees terms, although city manager immediately becomes vested, and general employees after 5 years. Kyle would be fully vested on June 4th, 2023, which is to say he is approaching his 5th year in June 2023. And that was the numbers I was given. I can repeat any of those if that informs you, but those questions were certainly considered in the draft figures.
because I was looking at this, and obviously when we discussed salaries, et cetera, these were for people with, 20, some cases 30 years more experience, vastly more degreed. Right now, what I'm looking at, and this is not buying anybody, it's just as my shot at it. If we're taking, say, $93,000 right now as is current, I'd be willing to say we had 3% of that and offer $96,000. Like I can't see going to 115 immediately, because once you get to 115 and then you're talking annual increments in the space of about 10 years, it could potentially be unaffordable. So you got to work a little bit both ways, make sure that they have a pathway for longevity. But at the same time, we are appreciative of what he's done. So he's keeping that additive that we put in, and then putting 3% on that for $96,000 salary initial. That's all I have, though. Appreciate that. Thank you.
Mr. Bankert, I see your hand is raised.
Well, when Mr. Riefler interviewed for the job and before we did any interviewing, I think Mr. Zabel and I seconded, and I was $123,000 we were looking for a base salary. In our current budget, we budgeted around $185,000 to give Mr. Riefler a 3% increase when Social Security participants are getting an 8.7% increase. I think it's disrespectful for the job that he's been doing. I think we should increase it to a minimum of $120,000 of salary. I think he deserves it. It's well under the budget. It's well under what we were seeking to pay. And what have we done for him for the last, 5-6 months? Nothing. Okay. I proposed 4 times to move him to city manager. Mr. Zabel proposes it once and it gets a unanimous vote, but this should have been done months ago. Hopefully it's done before Christmas, Kyle. That's all.
Member Baker, could you repeat the figure? I didn't catch it that you were proposing.
At least 115 to 120.
Thank you.
Which would be 65,000 under our budget.
Leslie?
One question on the first page and the second whereas clause, at a public meeting on October 22nd, 2010. Is that a correct date? Or am I missing something there?
That sounds like a typo.
It's 2210. They got the numbers mixed up.
October
Yeah,
22.
October 10th, 2022.
Yeah.
Sorry, that was interposed. Thank you for that.
I was looking in my calendar to see when we had our last meeting. No, I would be totally in favor of,
Otherwise, the
Going
attorney's
forward
been
with
spending
this.
way too much time.
pardon?
Otherwise, the attorney spent way too much time negotiating this contract.
I will work with the other city.
So you're in favor of the 115?
Yes.
Mr. Roberts?
Yeah, first off, I think the 115 is a great number, and here's why. Early on, we looked at some other competing towns and cities within Florida, coastal type towns and cities. And I know Glenn and I were working on some different numbers regarding what people were being hired for. And I recall it was this 115 number was right in there. I think it went to a maximum of 118 and down to like 95, something like that. But many of those people that were hired, no, I can't say many. Some of those people that were hired may not have had any experience in a coastal type town. There's a lot of things they may have been missing. Kyle obviously has been here for a while. There's some things he does extremely well because of that. I think also, Dave, you had said that down the street, a town relatively recently hired somebody for the city manager or the town manager, and she was previously like the CFO or something like that. She held a position, was more of the accounting type person, had done a great job for that town. I actually called them. And she was promoted and everybody was in favor of it, the city council or the city commission, whatever they were called. So she went directly from that previous position to her new position, and it was in the 130 range that this particular person got. Now, she had been with the city for quite a while. But personally, I feel the 115, if I had to pick the number before I actually saw this, based on the numbers that I've seen out there and what we looked at before, I think that's a solid number. So I'm for the 115.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Shirley.
Well, I just want to start by saying 115 accounts to 139 roughly when you add in all the benefits. So just let's, when we're looking at it, let's make sure we're looking at the total number. You know, I'm not opposed to the 115 number, but if that, you know, we're looking at, you know, we're all focused on a number and not so much the rest of the terms of the contract. And we're looking at a 2-year contract. So I'd say if we did enter at that 115 number, that's the number for years 1 and 2. I think there's going to be some learning curve, some time. I still stand firm that, you know, there should be some education requirements. I'm not talking about furthering degrees. I could care less about a degree. I'm talking about furthering, his public management experience and trying to get him in a program, whether it's with FSU, Florida State, I don't know. They have some public management programs. The FCCMA has monthly training. And, I initially suggested that we connect him with a senior advisor who would mentor him and help him sharpen his management skills. And I think that, that he has a bit of a learning curve. Kyle, I'm sorry, I don't mean to talk about you like you're not in the room. This is very awkward, but we need to strengthen his skills and invest in them. And so I'm okay with the 115, but I think that's the wage for years 1 and 2. While he works on continuing education that we agree to pay for. I think in here it said we would contribute $2,500 towards some associations, but I think that needs to be modified to also include paying for education.
I think it does, because right after it talks about the 2,500, it says city further agrees to consider budgeting and paying for managers reasonable travel for professional development, et cetera. So there's a 2,500 for
the associations.
Yeah, for membership dues. And then beyond that, we can go beyond that to go to city manager 101 or to whatever.
Yeah, and I'm not familiar with those, other than the ones I know that they have at the college level, but I think that, we'll need some direction, and that's where.
I think it provides for that in there. And I agree that.
And there were some mentoring resources available.
Through the senior advisor program and the senior advisor program in addition points to ICCMA and FCCMA, which is one of those memberships specifically, that those are the associations for city managers in Florida. I'm much like as a municipal attorney, I have the Florida Municipal Attorneys Association, FMAA, where I can pursue those sorts of things. We can definitely make sure he's plugged into those resources and those people locally. The senior advisor program is not just, for example, for recruitment, but also there is a sounding board and resource.
So that should be a requirement, I would think.
And also, I like her proposal about, if we're gonna do 115 for each of those, the first year and the second year. And then obviously the education.
I think that I would agree with that. Going back to Mr. Banker's comment, I know it doesn't seem like much, but a 26,000 instant increase is pretty darn cool. I think that we could have gone a different route. We had several candidates we could have hired. We held in there, and I don't think we've treated you wrongly. I hope you don't feel that way. But you're still here, and we're working with you, and we're trying to make this work. So please don't let those comments weigh on your heart. Okay, we're doing what we think is the right thing, and we're doing our due diligence. Personally, I'm not opposed to the 115. I think it's probably a little on the high side. I'd like to see the training also. But I think that this council is willing to work with you while you obtain that training and the mentoring and seek out any resources that will help you to do the best job you can. So I'm fine with that salary. Other comments from the council?
I have no further no further comments on any of the limitations or numbers in the rest of the contract. I'm willing to go forward based on that. Talk about 115.
Mr. Bankard.
I think we all should get smart here and jump on the 115 and give him a pay raise like every other employee will get, especially with his economy, because he has now been the city manager, interim, whatever you want to call it, past now 2 storms. You pay him too low, someone's going to pick him off from us, and we're going to lose him. So we can be cheap about it and lose him, or we can compensate him what he deserves. Thank you.
Thank you. Were there other areas of this?
As we continue and members able, I might ask you to clarify with all due respect. In as much as there was, I have a draft, Kyle has a draft, here's the differences, and we say like, otherwise I'm good with it. I'm going to understand that is, otherwise I'm good with all of Kyle's proposed revisions to the agreement, because that would be the later in time draft. So in as much as my thing says, for example, just to look at something, separation severance, it says this, his are the same, but there's a little bit of added language. If you say I'm good with it, the added language stays in the draft.
That's where it's approached.
Okay, just want to make sure there's no
For
misunderstanding.
me,
Thank
I
you.
mean, obviously.
Right.
But for me.
But as you go through, if there's things that you're saying, this is what I want, I'm good with what's in there. I want to know which there we're talking about.
Mr. Roberts.
Page 4 of 14. Probably 7/8 of the way down the page where it's highlighted in blue for the $600 a month. I just wanted to clarify with that, Kyle, where it says this incentive payment option shall not apply until after the manager has provided written verification that he is covered by other health insurance. Now, not you specifically, but if that was me in my case, and perhaps my spouse has insurance opportunities available, I get added to that policy. Are we requesting that he actually show that he's paying an equivalent of that much money for his add-on insurance? Or what are we trying to address there? Just the fact that he has additional insurance, does he have to show that he's paying money for the other insurance? Which is why we're giving you $600. I just wanted to clarify that.
The way
If
I
you don't
read
mind me
when-
asking, so like
when
right
I
now,
signed up for it, I had to prove that I was covered under my wife's insurance.
right?
I think in providing the documentation, it showed the additional payment for that.
Okay,
But the program was designed as an incentive to, I guess, get an employee to be covered by some other means. Because I think the calculation of the $600 a month was sort of half the amount it might cost to insure that employee.
okay, that's fair. That makes sense.
Other questions?
I think I have a question on page 6. Automobiles, the very last sentence there where it says manager, however, agrees to use city-owned vehicle, a sedan in good and safe operating condition for long trips in or out of the state of Florida. And then there's a random letter H next to it. So I think that probably was intended to be deleted because we don't have a city vehicle. I mean, the work truck, but I don't think that that's something he would drive.
That's on the meetings.
I'm just making sure I'm looking at the language.
Yeah.
Apologies. Section sub G.
Yeah, it kind of looks like the,
It's intended to
G and
be-
H and I, something got,
Something was deleted
Confused
or
there.
something, yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah, got mixed. Fine, handle. That might have been between the revised drafts. I'm not seeing that in mine, but it might have been a vestige of how the draft 2 came through. Certainly I will make sure any final draft is clean. I'm looking at it now. I think it has to do with how track changes came through. Yeah, I think you're right. A sedan in good and safe operating, that was notes from Kyle's draft. I would certainly clean up that element and make sure that if it does capture something, it would probably stop at the repair and fuel costs and eliminate the sentence that begins manager however agrees to, and everything after that would be out as it presently reads.
We're using a personal vehicle. Is there any mention of required insurance?
It's in there.
I don't believe there's a specific insurance requirement in the
It
draft.
says it has to be insured. I think it doesn't have a dollar value.
And what is our maximum
Yeah.
payout for an accident? Something happens and we're sued. I'm not saying you're going to do that, but I think that
Our statutory limitation in tort is $200,000 per
$200,000.
individual, $300,000 per incident.
and I think that should be the requirement for any employee that's using their own vehicle within the city or for city business.
My understanding is it doesn't have to be in the employment contract. It's covered elsewhere.
Well, and what we have here is manager shall be responsible for the payment of insurance,
Right.
fuel maintenance, not mandating the coverage of as it relates to the automobile. Also, if he's operating in his official capacity at the time, that would likely be within the scope of the city's existing policy through its carrier. If he's on official city business and gets in an accident merging onto, God forbid, onto the road right here and hits somebody because he was going out to respond to a call, he's in his official duties, in his official scope. Now, if he's on his way home and pulls out, different result. But as it relates to driving around town or on the city's business, that's typically within your carrier policy. I'm not saying I've read the riders and declarations for your city's policy. As an ordinary course of municipal insurance, the employee's official acts are covered. But if you wish to make it clear that he will have insurance on his vehicle, we can certainly mandate that. That's not.
I just don't want our insurance company thinking that we're only driving city-owned vehicles on official city business,
Okay.
because that
Right.
could create a problem.
Yeah.
Other questions? Mr. Banker, do you have a question?
No,
All right, is everyone on the same page? Do we agree with Mr. Reefler's version of this contract?
So will we get one more finished copy to review? Just, without any of the side notes and the colors and stuff on there, this is it, this is the baby right here.
As colorful a person as I am, yes, I will ultimately have a clean document for you, and it would be my intention, based on the very little dialogue that has happened here, is to put this in a clean copy, send it to you, and say this is what would be in the next regular meetings agenda items for final approval. Unless there's some, and please, you are all free to contact me directly if there's a, hey, Randy, I didn't realize between then and now there's this. Ultimately, we'll have to have buy-in, and I'll say like, oh, but Scrivener's errors are not a big concern right now.
Right.
If we find a misplaced, an O where there should be an E, that stuff happens. We can fix it. That stuff happens and can be fixed. If there's something substantive, like we should have addressed this, then I'll have a draft and say, subject to the added note Mr. Roberts had. But generally speaking, my intention at this stage is to come with you for a clean draft at whatever meeting you decide, whether you wish to make it a special meeting or another meeting, or your next regularly scheduled meeting in December in 2 weeks. Or whatever.
Would it be possible to have that before it comes out on the agenda, where we just?
Oh, yeah, I would not spring it on you. I would hope to have it to you. I mean, this is simple enough that I think I could have it to you this week.
Okay,
That would
great.
be my hope, and just say, there's that amount of time, and that's also provided. And I'm not trying to box you in anything, Mr. Reefler, but provided Mr. Reefler doesn't have added inputs, having heard your conversation, that as we saw that happen in the past where we thought we were there, and then there's, oh, wait, this one question. Nothing's done until it's signed. And so I want to make sure that variable is still recognized.
Okay.
I'm fine with that approach.
I have a question. Is there something else I should have that says see Kyle Reefler's CV appended here too, and I don't see anything.
I did not provide you his resume. His resume was part of the various application materials, and I didn't wish to,
Just want
it
to
seemed
make
like
sure
you
I
had
wasn't,
enough paper.
yeah, I want to
but
make sure I
would
wasn't
certainly
missing
make sure
anything.
it's in there. And I do that in part so that if there was, from an employment law standpoint, if we later on find like, well, it was represented to us, these were his qualifications, they were not.
Right.
Or also, or if he says, you guys had a misunderstanding of what my background was, I never represented that. Well, this is what the contract recognized who we were hiring.
Then another question, just general question for the council, or is everyone comfortable with a 2-year contract? When before we were looking for 5-year.
This wouldn't be committing us to a full 2 years. Is that correct?
I think her question is in the inverse, but correct, you're never committed to any amount of time because he's an at-will employee and he and I are only as good as our next meeting. While you have a, I think, 3-year commitment with our firm, maybe 2 years. Any next meeting could be my last meeting. So yes, in that sense, it's not a commitment. That way it wouldn't be a breach. You just have notice provisions and subject to what your charter has augmented rights he has in how a dismissal would go. I think member Shirley's question was more to, with the last candidate, and of course, everything is different. The last candidate was external. It was, we don't want you to come here and then leave a year later. And so we were tracking towards a longer commitment. I think her question is less about the commitment and more about the brevity
Right. I mean, I'm not.
or perceived brevity.
Yeah,
should say.
for me, I'd, love to see us go enter into an agreement that like, we're kind of in it a little, if we're gonna invest some money, should we say, let's enter a 3-year contract if we're investing in some education dollars and those sorts of things. So just things to put on the table if we're trying to get this thing to a final contract agreement, I'd like to make sure that we cover all those bases.
Mr. Roberts.
I'll be honest, when I first saw 2 years, my first feeling was I thought that was short.
Me too.
So I concur. I think, especially like you just brought up, I mean, we want Kyle to succeed and I know he will. And so we're going to be pumping resources, money to help him out in every way we can. So we'd hate for him at the end of 2 years, say, hey, that's pretty cool. I'm very marketable now. Thank you. Adios. So not that you would do that, but yeah, 3 years I think would be much better.
I can go along with 3 years.
Mr. Bankard.
I think we should do at least 3 years, possibly 5.
Leslie.
I'm happy with 2. I have no problem with 3, because it's just, we can terminate with.
Yeah.
We can get out of it, either side can get out of it at any
Right.
time, so it's sort of a technicality, shall I say.
City may not be here.
Pardon?
The city may not be here. You don't know what's going on with hurricanes.
But the end of 3 years or 2 years,
Too
that's the
soon.
time we
Don't
can
ask
sit
for it,
down
yeah.
and renegotiate.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
I'm fine with 3 years. Everybody good with that?
It's Kyle.
Yes, sir.
Should we ask
How about
Kyle?
you?
Well,
question?
Council agrees.
That one I would want to take back with my legal and have a discussion about.
Say that one.
I can't give you an answer right now. I want to take it back and see how it's written out in the contract and
I think we're good with either one, 2 or 3, right?
So you were good with 2, for sure, right?
sure, yeah.
And if,
You're going to check to see if you're good with 3.
Yes, I looked at all the previous city manager contracts and I thought, given Dr. Griffin was a different situation, but he 5 years is a very long term. And I saw that the previous city managers were all on an annual basis for renewal, and I thought 2 years was good for renegotiation, but again, I'd have to consider it.
well, and let me ask you this, which may inform your decision making. Presently, the instruction is 2 years, 115,000 salary, 115 salary for both years. We add a year, what then? Then at that point, would you be open to considering in year 3, salary shall increase commensurate with increases to other employees or at X percentage? As I redraft it, that does change a material term that you folks have sort of come to a general agreement about. And so we can do, subject to his agreement, we can do 3 years. And if he doesn't agree, we can talk about that. But we can do 3 years. But I want to make sure that I'm capturing your terms. Up until now, salary was stagnant in the contract term. Now, would you want it to be stagnant all 3 or variable?
Variable after year 2, I think.
And 3 years
Would think so,
matches the
yeah.
election cycle.
Mhm. Yeah,
I'm looking at the page 14, page 4 of 14. It says, manager shall be entitled to an increase in base salary on each anniversary date of employment.
That's in his draft, yeah.
Okay, well, that's.
But what you
that's
folks just said orally here was, I want it 2 years. I'm willing to go to his number, but I don't want to have an automatic increase. I want it to be 115 for year 1 and year 2 in a 2-year agreement. So yes, that's what that draft says, but based on your notes, that's sort of changing the landscape.
But if Kyle is go okay after he talks with who he needs to talk to, then the 3rd year, after the 2nd year, before the 3rd year begins,
Mhm.
we would be amenable to an increase.
right.
So we said, yeah.
Is that the consensus of the body? And so-
Yes.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Not me. With this economy, you're going to freeze a guy's wages for 2 years? That's insulting. How many of you guys are taking a wage freeze for 2 years?
If I may, we've doubled his salary, frankly. He started at 63,000 no more than 4 months ago. Now we're talking 115. That's almost doubling the salary. Nobody here, and I see some serious salaries in my business, will even come close to that type of a jump within 4 months.
He is now our city manager.
Um,
Okay, he is taking on the responsibilities, okay, of the city manager. That's not doubling his salary. That's compensating him for what he is doing. All right. He was doubled his salary because he was an apprentice, more like, okay, an assistant. He has shown that he can do the job, compensate him accordingly.
Any other comments from the council? All right, I think the consensus for the most part is 2 years, and then at the beginning or the end of year 2 would be eligible for a pay increase. I think within that 2 years, that would be plenty time to get the training, required training, and hit some of the milestones that we're looking for.
Good.
Even after the first year, if there's no raise in the compensation, would you still be providing me with a annual review? I'd like the
Of
feedback.
course, yes. Do you have any other comments, Mr. Riefler?
Not at this time, no.
Okay. Any other comments on this before we move on to the next item?
Just a thank you to the city attorney for, you know, working us through this process. Thank you.
Pleasure.
All right. We are now on to item 3, discussion of Councilmember Zabel's proposed list. Now, I'm seeing this is broken up in some.
That's
you
what I'm
have the
going to
master
address.
list.
This is not we're not going to
Well, I
discuss
was gonna
everything. It's
say
more of
the-
a format. I want
Guy
to
with
say.
the most items buys pizza tonight, but
That can be possible. The way I'm feeling today is like, ooh. No, basically is, I was trying to see an idea is we need to communicate better with the citizens. Too often, nobody actually knows what phone calls were made to the mayor or to a councilman or something that was said at a chili cook-off, whatever. There's no list that when a citizen has a thought or an idea that we should have somewhere where, yeah, there it is. We've heard it. We all know it's there and there's some work being done on it. Or there may just say that, look, we've all talked about it, considered it, but we can't pursue it at this time. It provides us also with an area or a workup. We're going, we have a city council in 4 more years and they come back, hey, I got this great idea. So no, take a look at the work list. We've considered this back then. Maybe situations have changed. We want to relook at it. I don't want to scare you away. I mean, these are just some of the things that I've been receiving through emails and phone calls. I just wanted to show you a format for it. Because what I'd like to do is for city council issues, if you look at page 6 and 7, I just broke down the strategic goals. So we could put those with issues that come forward on the agenda. Same here with, if you see items, grab any one of those items, try to put, okay, it hits goal number 4B, playground decision or walking easement breakout. Again, just trying to allow it. So we are looking at the strategic plan. We're listening to the citizens. Citizens know that we've considered their inputs so much that there's a working list. And as things do progress, I mean, they're showing a area where we have done the following. That was one of the comments they asked. Well, how do we know that items that we come up with are being addressed? In fact, later on in the program, we're talking about answers to questions. Nobody in this world can actually answer every single question that could come up. The answers in military, yes, sir, no, sir. And no excuse, sir. And the final one is, I don't know, but I'll find out. And this is the I don't know, but I'll find out. And the citizens can go there, online and say, okay, hey, they heard me. Here's what they're doing. And sometimes it kind of helps us as a memory jogger. So that's what I wanted to show you and give you a kind of a fleshed out idea. So you have an idea how kind of it looks like.
Can I ask you, how would you propose like this being kept electronically? So if I came 3 years from now and said, well, what did we do on stormwater. I
Yeah.
can search this document or wherever it's posted and
it-
it will give me all those.
Right, the recommendation would be, I'm not trying database or anything, but simple word is enough. And it could be maintained on the city webpage. Basically, at the front block, you just go, okay, I want to see the citizens concern page. Here it is, click. Read down through it. Here's what, maybe in some cases, look, somebody's already asked the question and here's the status. I just didn't know about it.
Right, the answer is right there.
Yeah.
Council?
As you folks consider this issue, another resource, now this is more of a capital outlay thing, but some communities have their minutes and agendas indexed in a way that they're searchable. And so if you search the word X, it will show you whether it's an agenda item from 2012, it's a year
Right.
certain of whatever's in the database.
Right.
But that's another way to, rather than creating a new record, say our existing records capture, that's a whole nother thing on
Yeah.
Acela and all these other, and that's just one player in the marketplace, but these sort of players that have those platforms, that's something else. As you wish to consider resources, another way that communities handle, hey, has the word rental been used, has the word stop sign been used, and you just search it and then it comes
That's
up.
fine. Yeah, I mean, that's why I try to approach it this way, where they can actually see the objective linked to a strategic plan outline. And it's really based off a question. Hey, recommend emails, names of all council members be placed on agendas for all to see without going to the website. Okay. The council likes that, later on, I mean, we can work through these things. But they can see, here's what's been done. Search engines are difficult because not everybody knows or has a good vocabulary of words that can be used in a search engine. Some people understand line, but some other people have 5 different words that mean that and can get a better search result. What's some thoughts?
So when I see this, what I hearing you say is, like, for instance, the emails.
Yeah.
You had a resident say, hey, I can't find the emails for council
Right.
members. So they're struggling with even that simple task on our website.
Yeah,
So then will they be able to search this?
that's why it should be a search. You just go to that page and just scroll down through it and read it.
Gotcha.
I mean, you can search it. I mean, you can do web searches. It just go to the top, click web search and it'll search the text for you. In some cases, Google will actually start pulling up these results. But it's just easier in a Word document, just go down through the Word document. And anybody can suggest it. I mean, all of you are out and about talking to people and just add it on. Hey, add it on. Hey, mayor, hear this. And then we can go through it occasionally, every 3 months. Hey, heard this, let's work this issue. Or
Kyle, doesn't our WordPress site have a search function in it now?
It does, and it's pretty general. You get it up at the top toolbar and it basically will find any, use of that word in any of the pages and it'll bring those pages up in order.
I don't know if it always works. Because I go to it often
Yes,
and I can't ever find anything. I have to
Yeah.
go through
Okay.
all the tabs on the web page.
yeah, and the tabs can be very hard to navigate.
Yeah.
If you just don't know.
The tabs are
architecture of
definitely
the
different.
website.
You have to know where you're going. but,
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It seems to me that a
Mhm.
search box on the website should, no matter what the word is, if you type it in there, it should find every instance of that word on the entire website.
In my experience, it has, but I would have to, if you want to give me some examples that maybe
I
I
have
could
to
try
think.
to.
But in
I'm
context.
not sure if
yeah.
it was, I was looking for the strategic plan or I was looking for something, but
Yeah,
it was
that helps.
something so just commonplace that
Sure.
I searched and I couldn't find it. I ended up calling Lynn and I think it was missing on the website, but still, there's. And then there was something else I was searching one day and I could not find it. So it's happened twice to me. So.
Yeah, and I brought this up also coming from the first meeting we ever had, the mayor asked, give me a list. And everybody's kind of thinking from, oh, God, just provide the list. A search engine really doesn't provide the functionality that this would. Because again, you're putting out in plain language, hey, recommend all agenda items be straight, with a strategic plan ID. Okay, what did you guys do? We did the following.
Right.
Item closed.
As long as whatever is posted on this site, this search engine, it's public meeting data and nothing else,
Absolutely.
then I think that's fine, but we still have to have the search or some sort of a database to present the information with.
I mean, I could build one, but I know where you're going with that one. It's like, yeah, that would be nice.
Would it make sense for
Actual searches.
when we finally do have a part-time clerical person that maybe we have them keep a monthly list that's then distributed at either work session or council meeting and then becomes part of the minutes so that we
We
can,
shoot them the email, hey, objective,
Yeah,
please
so
add an
that-
objective for me.
each one of us can give feedback as you get
Because
comments.
we all
from
get it.
customers.
Yeah.
Also, are these, obviously, they have your name on them, but
Adam changed what,
these aren't 100% accurate objectives because the majority hasn't agreed to move forward on them.
that's right.
Right. So there has to be we probably just need to go through the list, do a quick, yeah, we agree with this. No, we don't agree with
And they may
that.
not be in the right format. I mean, you got to give somebody a solution before they kind of get their hands around it. Going, okay, now, okay, I see let's change this.
Well, we started going through this a while back, and I don't have a problem doing a few of these with every work session just to see if this is something we want to move forward
Yeah.
with. I have no problem. We're cruising right along. I have no problem starting with the first few goals.
Oh, okay.
If you would like to open discussion before we do that, I'm gonna call on Mr. Bankert.
Yeah, I've been on our Muni code many times, our website, and our search tab, I think, is pretty good. I mean, I just went on it now while I'm listening, and I pulled up some of the things that were mentioned at during this discussion, and every one of them resonated right away with a pop-up and a follow-up page. I guess what I don't understand is the emails that from citizens to council members, are they going to be exposed? Is that what you're looking to do? Or all council will get, anyone that wants to see anybody's emails will be able to see them?
They
Well, that's
should.
already the case under chapter 119 if they're requested, just to be
If they're
clear.
if they're requested, that's
No, I
true.
understand. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm talking about now they're going to be publicized.
I don't think that's the goal here. I don't think that's it at all. I think it's basically Mr. Zabel is trying to establish goals, something long-term that of things that we would like to accomplish. And then we just we post our progress for each one of the action items, just to see where we are. Have we gotten started? When's the estimated date? What's it
Yeah.
going to cost? Because right now there's very little of that available. We have the construction projects that are being shown, but there may be a park bench project or something like that.
Dave, I have a
Yes.
question. This is sort of a question for our attorney. Do we have an issue with the sunshine law if, as council members, we respond to something else that somebody else put on, another council member put on there? Not in a public meeting?
The
Does
plan
that
was
make
they would
sense?
be presented in a public meeting. That's what that's what I was saying is it gets delivered to us as part of our agenda items.
Yeah, but I think it's already happened a little bit like
It's
this.
historical data.
But when Mike has put out something and said, here's something that came up and this is the way I feel about it. I think that could have caused an issue. I wasn't actually going to necessarily bring that up, but I think,
Really?
I know how Mike sometimes like 17 times has challenged me on something, so I'm giving one back here. So that,
Yeah.
so when he comes out in an email that goes to everybody and says,
we
this
can.
is some information I got, some citizens asked me about this. I think this might be a great idea and I'm for this. So now, just like this
We'll
young
be doing
lady's
that,
bringing up
yeah.
here, I don't know if that's, he's telling us how he feels, how he would vote
Mhm.
for a particular thing.
So I'm going to unpack that because there's about 4 or 5
Okay.
questions in the various comments that have been made.
Oh, yeah.
first point, if the city has an official running document of its task items and endeavors and historically cataloging it, there's not, to me, a sunshine law issue there, provided there is a captive set of who the authors are, and those are not council members, meaning if that document exists on the website, the clerk changes it, not any one of you can organically go in there and say, oh, I want to do this now. Oh, no, I think we should do that.
Mm.
That's what your meeting agendas are for. So I think that sort of model where there's just an archival document is not, archival is it's capturing past conduct. To address the point of what about us taking positions on issues that may reach other council members, there is nothing in the sunshine law that prevents you per se from running out onto the beach right now and saying, I am totally against condos over 4 stories tall, any more than there is about you saying it on your Facebook page or otherwise, in a general, hey, whoever wants to hear me can hear me situation. The challenge with communications as between each of you, whether it is, I know you're on my newsletter distribution, or I just send a targeted email reply all to something Randy sent to the council, is the potential for the violation. It's more of a prudence than a restriction. You would be hard pressed to find something that says it is per se a violation for me to speak in your direction.
Mhm.
The problem is that you as a person and possibly more even so as a politician are going to be inclined to respond. And that's where the meeting of the minds occurs, whether that's what I would joke as a Monday night Merlot manifesto or a Friday night, hey, aren't we all so great? Somebody responding, no, we're not all so great. You're actually kind of trash. And now we start having this meeting of the minds, and that's really where the problem happens. And so you've in public meetings jurisprudence, you see this idea of the first bite of the apple, where, well, if I sent it first, I'm good, but the moment you reply, you create a violation. Well, you're kind of setting each other up for failure that way, especially where you're taking stances, because inevitably somebody is going to, no matter how many times I admonish all of you that reply all is not your friend, and always be mindful. Well, that's in the past. Yes, but it has the potential to come back before you. So the fact that something happened in the past is an idea. Well, I'm just talking about what we did. Yeah, but we're talking about what we did to determine whether we need to do something different in the future. And so that's where that kind of becomes a problem. So the short answer is a one-way communication is not advisable because it is the foundation for a violation.
Sure.
But it is not necessarily by and unto itself a violation, barring certain circumstances. If member Zabel sends something to member Notero one way, but it says Lloyd told me to tell you, well, now we've got a whole nother issue.
Mm.
So, the it depends factor of being a lawyer will always say, like, I needed more facts. But on its face, an archival document, not a problem. Newsletter, Facebook blast, I spoke to the paper and said, we need more bike lanes in our community. That's not a sunshine law violation because the Times published your position. But once you start going back and forth, it is.
And that's where the first one that speaks silences
Yeah,
everyone.
silences everyone. And you'll see this, we've advised this in others. If you've been to these training conferences, like, well, what about when we all get invited to the Baptist church on a Sunday to talk about our changing community? Usually you're advised, one, sit in different places. And then the moment one of you says, you're right, this community needs this, everybody else cannot touch that issue.
Okay, thanks.
So obviously, this goal number one is to figure out some way to post our progress on current and future projects. But it's not a sounding post for any individual
Correct.
council member.
In fact, if possible, it'd be great if somebody in the city maintained it. We just send them an email and go, I'd like to add on.
And see, the problem that I have with this is that these are not our projects. They're the city's projects, which ultimately lands in the city manager's lap, and he's responsible for it. So really, it seems that it would be more of an administrative function to post progress on all projects that are going on. And I think for the most part, you are doing that.
I'm trying to, and I can elaborate on that list. I think my city manager report has grown over the last couple of meetings, but if, more direction from council on projects that we're taking up, then I'll just keep following up on.
Perhaps if your city manager report, you had an update during the meeting, but you had a living document that you maintain on the website, that may be easier.
Sure.
And then because nothing's ever dropping off, you can mark it complete and it becomes historical data and moves down the list. But that way people can look and see if we've already accomplished something that they're wanting.
They always ask.
What's next?
Actually, if we can, I mean, I'd like to go through the list, but we got a lot of stuff here and I just defer to the other items on the work session tonight. We can go through this list at a later work session.
Well, it's on the
Gotta get
agenda.
started.
Is everyone else good with that? Yes?
Yeah.
Yes, okay. All right, so let's move on to item number 4, placed on the agenda by Councilmember Banker. Discussion of Councilmember Banker's proposed resolution for council to respond to comments from citizens of Bel Air Beach on non-agenda items. Mr. Banker, take it away.
Well, I don't know if I have to now that I just heard that we're so concerned about citizens or citizens' concerns, and the resolution speaks for itself. A citizen gets up, addresses council on a non-agenda item, and we tell them thank you, and they have to sit down, and hopefully a council member an hour later, 2 hours later, 4 hours later during their city council comments will comment on it. All this resolution does is provide, if this council is serious about communicating with its citizens, they'll do it on the spot and instantaneously and not make the citizens wait or call or email later.
Thank you, Mr. Banker. I'd like to make the first comment on this. I jotted some notes down this afternoon about this, so I'll read them to you, and everyone can make up their own minds. The citizen comments are designed to give citizens the opportunity to speak freely on any topic they desire. However, agenda items are there to steer the meeting. If any council member would like to respond to non-agenda items, they are free to do so during council comments or by email, phone calls, or in person after the meeting. Citizen comments were placed at the beginning of the meeting for the convenience of the citizens, but their comments do not supersede a planned agenda. This community just witnessed 3 years of poorly ran meetings. In the last election, I promised that I would fix our meetings. So far, I've kept that promise, and I have no intention of changing it back. That's my comments. Anyone else?
Sure. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I agree with you. If they have something that they want the council to discuss at the beginning, when it says, are we going to approve the agenda? And they could say, I'd like to add something to the agenda, and then we put it on the agenda. If it's not on the agenda, council members don't have time to prepare for it, to, shall I say, do their homework. I would not be in favor of, opening up a citizen's comment to free, open discussion of the council.
Thank you. Mr. Zabel?
Yeah, I'm in agreement with you because you can take a 3-minute comment. And if you had a council member respond to that, they can basically filibuster the entire evening back and forth. And it's not only a venue for comment, but for abuse. And I feel very strongly we should not be abusing the citizens of this city, period. They have the comment time. And frankly, if you think you got all the answers immediately, you're a lot smarter than I am. And I got the degrees and the experience to prove it. I won't answer a question straight up. You look, get the correct answer for the people once, always, forever. And that's not just you. You don't play stump the council here. This procedure that we have worked out works very well. We are not abrogating our First Amendment freedoms because we can email, call. I do it all the time. I had a few emails before I came here tonight. So we need to follow a structure
And that's the agenda is approved. I appreciate all the statements made so far. I'm in full agreement with you.
Thank you. Mr. Roberts,
Nothing to add, except that I did receive a couple of phone calls. That's not a lot, maybe 3 of people that had read the agenda ahead of time. And they had expressed that they were very much against that.
thank you. Vice Mayor Shirley,
I had the same. I had a couple of people, residents reach out to me and say they were against us considering this resolution. And, you know, it could, for all the reasons you mentioned, it could just be a slippery slope and we lose control of the meeting once again. So I'm not in favor of this resolution.
thank you. Mr. Bankard, I see your hand is raised.
It's never an embarrassment to tell the citizens we don't have an answer for you tonight, but we'll get back to you, okay? As soon as we have a qualified answer. What we do now is we just thank them for showing up and that's it. If these people that are calling council members saying that they're against being responded to by their council, that's very, very confusing to me that people would give up their rights to have addressed the council and then have the council return their comments.
I'm gonna
There's
respond.
America go.
I'm going to respond to you on that and give you an example of why the way that we're doing it actually does work. A gentleman showed up and he complained about not having enough park benches at the beach accesses. I gave him a call the next day. We had a conversation about it. Mr. Riefler got involved with it. This was all from a one-way comment that he made. He's going to get his benches in the accesses. We're working on it right now. And it's all because a citizen came, made a comment. No, he didn't like not getting an answer immediately, but he was very happy whenever he found out that we were going to do something about it. So on top of that, the meeting ran efficiently. We wrapped it up at a decent amount of time, not 11 o'clock at night. And we're getting things done.
And may I
But,
add
Mr.
that,
Mayor,
because we don't respond immediately, that doesn't mean that we don't respond. They're getting responses. It may not happen right at that meeting. It may be after the meeting. It might be the next day, but the citizens are getting responses.
Any other comments from the council?
Sir.
Mr.
Mr.
Baker, your
Mr.
hand's
Mayor.
raised.
What you just cited about the park benches is a perfect example of what I'm saying. A reply to him saying, we will look into this and we'll get back to you, justify this resolution. But if you review the tape, it was, your time is up. And that was it. Now, I commend you for going the next step forward in addressing this. But what I'm saying is a simple courtesy of telling the citizens, I will look into this, or this can't be done, or I'm not sure about this, but we'll look into it for you. That's what this resolution's about. And it's really hard to believe citizens don't want that.
Mr. Roberts.
Not that you need any defense, Mr. Mayor, but I know I have heard on more than a couple occasions where you in fact have provided that information to somebody at the podium. And where you didn't just say, thank you very much. The times I think you said, thank you very much, where it was more of a case where somebody stood up and made some statements about something. But where people were asking a question, I'm confident that you always handled that very professionally, explained to them, thank you very much for the information and the question. We will take that into consideration and somebody will be working on this and getting back to you. So I've heard that many times.
Thank you. Any other comments on this topic?
Sure, if I can add to that, yes, thank you very much. I mean, we've all appreciated basically the change in leadership that's happened with the election. In fact, you know, people overwhelmingly voted for this way of acting on meetings. But also have to add that during the last meeting, we had somebody specifically asking, where do you stand on the contract? I thought you voted for it. And our attorney was able to basically do a brief at the end explaining where we were in the situation. But the key was you got to stick to the agenda. Otherwise, like I said, if I got 5 people out there, if I bring 5 of my buddies, I can physically filibuster this entire meeting if it was one of those give and take sessions. And you can't do that. You have to attend to the matters of the citizenry. And again, thank you very much. I really appreciate it. It's been a breath of fresh air. We all appreciate it, and so do the citizens.
Thank you. All right, that being said, let's move on to, let's see here. Item number 5, discussion of code enforcement survey results and a plan for action. This was placed on the agenda by interim city manager Reefler.
Thank you, Mayor. Want to go over just some of the results that came back from our survey that we sent out to the residents. It was during the month of October. And we went over this as a group in the code enforcement team that we put together and kind of came up with a direction to move forward in. I'd like to go over some of the results and then give you an idea of what we were thinking and what direction we're going. Start out with the first question, pretty straightforward, but it was, something to point out that we did get 47% of people who responded actually put their name as opposed to being anonymous. The next question kind of covered where in the city by street, the people where they lived and where they were answering these questions. And when we looked at the distribution over the whole city, it was pretty spread out. So we felt like that represented a pretty good selection of the city. Then when we got to the third question, we broke it down and we had the 23 of the possible code violations that we thought we wanted to get an opinion on. And we asked the participant, overall, were they not concerned, slightly concerned, moderately concerned, or very concerned? And these are the results as such. We'll come back to this in a different layout that I went over. Then we asked the question in a different way. We asked, of these possible code violations, if you had to pick 2, which you were most concerned in, what would those be? Just to see if we capture some different data from that question. Then we had another one that addressed how often in your area of Bel Air Beach are you seeing these violations? So they wanted to know the frequency that they're observing these violations that we're bringing up. And more so just to get an idea of what is being noticed, not so much what their concern level is, but are they seeing it, or are they not seeing it? So then we mixed it up and we did we showed some images and the images didn't print out on these results, but they were some different shots of people's yards. And one had a minimal amount of clutter, maybe just a couple toys or some tools left out, and then some were a lot more like trash and just items left in the yard. We were trying to gauge what the perception of what people consider to be an outdoor storage nuisance. And these results actually showed that almost every image, a good amount considered an actual storage nuisance. So that it kind of told us that the aesthetics of what the property looks like is important to our residents, and they do have kind of I guess a smaller tolerance for what's left out. The next question was the kind of get the feel of the current code enforcement measures. Are they appropriate in your mind? Are they excessive or are they too lenient? And then the last question was the whole, do you think code enforcement should be reactive or proactive? So the proactive would be focusing on, going out, patrolling, educating as much as possible to get clients throughout the city, or the reactive would be more on the this complaint's coming in, or this, this has been noticed, now let's go react to it. So coming back to question 3, when our group looked over all these results and we kind of discussed what jumped out at us. Question 3 jumped out at us, and we thought that we wanted to focus on what residents identified as being most concerning to them. And I broke this result table out by taking out, the not concerned, slightly concerned, and just putting the very concerned. And then what we did is we put them in rank order, and I highlighted the top 10. Just to kind of show what we got back as being most concerning to the residents. And then we did the same thing with the consistency or the level or the frequency of the violations that are being noticed, because we wanted to know what are they seeing, and what is jumping out at them that they're seeing in their neighborhood. So we just have an idea of which code violations are the highest volume of what they're observing. So I did the exact same thing. I got it down to the most consistently column, and then highlighted the highest ranking violations. So using that data, we decided that we wanted to create a quadrant system to best illustrate the results, where we have quad 1 in the upper left, which is the most, or the very concerning, or very concerned by the residents, and the constantly occurring. And then over at quad 2, top right, it's very concerning, but they're not seeing it as often. And then in quad 3, the bottom left, it's the not so concerned, slightly or moderate, but constantly occurring. And then quadrant 4 is the, slightly concerned and not seeing it that often. And we thought that was a good way to lay out, to depict, and draw our assumptions. So when in quad 1, which is going to be, the residents think it's very important that these violations don't occur, and they're constantly seeing them. For as far as code enforcement moving forward, we feel this is where our focus needs to be, because it's important to them and they're seeing it. So we need to make an effort to limit this from occurring, but to try and gain satisfaction by code compliance in the city. So the assumption is we want to make this our focal point. And I made a note on there because we did get a lot of comments, and this could be based on the survey design about the street parking, but we came to the conclusion that most of the street parking that residents are seeing is going to be the contractors during the business day. So we want to focus on the off hours so that we're stopping the illegal parking on the street and not so much the legal parking that we have every day on the streets. Moving forward, when we resurvey the residents to be able to measure if we're meeting our goals, I was going to clarify more so that the question was probably answered more accurately. So quadrant 2 was the very concerned, but sometimes or never occurring. One thing you saw on the graphs was that's where the short-term rental was much higher than any of the other violations, and that falls under that quadrant. So we may have it down where it's not being seen as happening as much, but when it does happen, people care a lot about it. So our assumption and our focus moving forward is whenever we see these, we know that they're important to the resident. So whenever it's seen, it needs to be stopped. And then our quadrant 3, and that I consider to contain a lot of the aesthetics in the community. And we found that it may not be quite as concerning as some of the other violations, like say the rodents or the short-term rentals, but it is something that people are seeing, that it's constantly occurring. And in this case, we think that it's code violations that we need to address because they're codes. They're there for a reason. And we need to do it more in a methodical manner of, once a week, driving around and documentation and focusing on, writing down where all these violations are occurring and over time, making sure that they're less consistent. And then the last quadrant is the slightly moderately concerned. It's never sometimes occurs. And these things, and the residents aren't highly concerned about them and they're not seeing it that often. So there's still code violations. They still need to be addressed, but we want to address these as they come in, as opposed to focusing our efforts specifically towards these codes.
Thank you very much. Council.
Yep. What I noticed here, what stood out was, first of all, I'm a data geek. I love this, and I'm assuming Councilman Roberts had a part to play in the design of this.
Nothing to do with it. Kyle did the whole thing.
Both of you guys, I love this. So take one of those 17 down. This is a good guy. But I noticed pops right out. Quad 4, the least, the worst. We really don't look at it is unlicensed handyman, and that's been the whole priority for the existing code enforcement. So what you guys demonstrated with data is like, we're going up the wrong tree, that code enforcement should be focusing on the quad 1. So I have by the way, again, I love this. This is good stuff.
Yeah, it's a great report. It's definitely
And the
good.
code enforcement officer was happy to get this. I think, don't you? Kyle?
Definitely.
He said, hey, this helps me a lot. Now I know what I need to do,
This is nice.
as opposed to, I think he had a lot of thoughts in his head when he's driving the city.
Right.
Yeah.
He's trying to see, 30 things at one time, some of which perhaps we found out that the citizens aren't that concerned about it.
No.
They know it's happening. They wish it didn't happen, but it's not, it's not in the top 5 things that they're concerned about. So it was great. Kyle put out the questionnaire, and I think a lot of people responded, and that was excellent.
Can we do this annually?
So I have a couple questions regarding this, though. What I found interesting is the rodent issue. And I think the city probably needs to take some action there. I'm setting bait boxes. I actually have a guy coming tomorrow to set 3 more bait boxes. I already have
My yard.
I already have 4 in my yard. I was standing out front with a dog yesterday, and at night, one ran. I was just telling my neighbor how I'd set bait boxes, and here comes this rat running right behind me. She goes, "There goes one right there."
Bigger than my dog.
And it went in the bush, and I figured with the dog out there, it wouldn't come out, but it didn't bother the rat at all. And then it came back and sat under the truck and just looked at us. So it's an issue. It's a real issue. And I don't know, no one in my next door area has fruit trees or anything that's attracting them. So I'm not sure why we're having an issue, but clearly it's an issue.
And I think, dealing with the private property, that's going to be a piece on the education and pointing out things that, what rodents would what they're going to harbor into, and then hopefully bringing attention to the residents that if they're seeing areas for them to live or a lot of rodents that they can.
So just so you know, they were under the hood of my car and chewed up some wires. So I had
Yeah, I had mine
sensor
too.
issues. Yeah, I had sensor issues, and it's not even cold. What's going to happen when it's cold out? It's going to be a real issue. So
$1,000.
yeah, I didn't spend nearly that, but only because the dealership wouldn't get me in, right? So I went to a mechanic.
I think the squirrels are infamous for the car engine areas as well, eating up. And I guess the squirrel is a rodent, but I think the biggest, I have a neighbor next to me has beautiful fruit trees. And of course, he hates the fruit rats. So he periodically puts out traps for them because he doesn't want to just poison them and have them die in his attic or something like that. But he told me one week he got 16. And I've seen them go across our fence. At first I thought they were squirrels, and I was like, oh, that's not a squirrel, it's a rat. Then after the storm that came through the other day, I was cleaning my pool and I was scooped down there just to get leaves and stuff and got a little rat. So he didn't make it. He got in the pool and drowned. But
I don't know. So you're saying citywide, there's not anything that that the city can do because it's private property? Is that your assumption?
Outside of the education piece, I mean, we could make recommendations based on what professionals say and possibly companies that could be used, but
yeah.
if they do see something that they're identifying as a home to rodents, if they're making us aware and it is a violation, considered a nuisance, then we want to act on it.
Well, maybe even in our parks and whatnot, we could control the
Sure,
city-owned
yeah.
property, right?
Sure, yes, and we do have rodents control in this whole property right here, and I can get some insight into our parks if there is a.
Like I know there's a park on Hibiscus and there's a couple banana trees on it. So that's, a good
Mhm.
opportunity to have rats on that property. So
Mhm.
Yeah.
something we should probably look at citywide.
Well, I'm thinking some of this goes back to just your standard landscape.
Mhm.
How much clutter do you have around your house? It's sort of like the coyote problem also. If they have a place to hide,
Right.
they're gonna do it.
Mhm.
So I'm curious, how did Deputy Klapka, what did he think about this list?
He likes that it's backed up by data. He likes that we're identifying what our focuses are going to be. And it gives him a chance that if there is a question on why he's drawing attention to this violation, he likes the fact that he can point to that we've reached out and heard back.
Does he feel like his directives are more clear now than they were before?
He does, and again, with this, we wanted to get a consensus from you of the direction that we're going in as a body, and then we want to share the results and our direction with the residents. And then from there, start taking action on it. And our goal is to follow up survey in a year so that we can measure where we're at.
Lynn Gunn would be very happy to hear that.
Yes.
He likes the metrics.
And we did learn a lot from the first survey. We're not expert survey writers, but we obviously learned things that we can design it better in the future to capture what we're looking for.
Good.
And will this be on the city website? Posted
Yes.
on the website? Okay, perfect. Are there any action items from here on this? I mean,
Well, it looks like the action items are the bullet points underneath each one of the quads under the assumptions of this is a focal point, stop when observed. It sounds like quad 4 is rely on neighbors to report issues more than anything. I'm guessing that if the deputy sees an obvious violation, someone's out there with bunch of saws and a crew, he's probably going to check on them just to make sure that
I'm mayor.
they're permitted. But I think that this is going to give him more to do than less.
Right. And of course, like if, somebody has a permit for something, replacing a window, and then he's seeing loads of pavers being taken into the backyard, that's something we want to know about because we don't want someone turning the whole backyard into an impervious surface. So, there's importance behind every code, but this is more of a way to draw up our objectives and our focus of where we're putting our time and energy.
I understand. Council?
And I'm confident that Kyle will do a great job. He's, like he said, he's going to follow up with a letter that's going to go to everybody that he sent the questionnaire to. Because I think it's important that, we've all been subjected to that where you fill out some type of a questionnaire and you never hear anything about it. And that just messes you up for the future. It's like, well, the next time I get one of these, I'm tossing it. So he'll do a great job with that. Let everybody know, thank you for doing it. And here's what we determined from your input. And here's what we're going to do about that. And so that'll be great. I don't have any question that we need to review that before Kyle sends that out. So he's just going to send that out to the people in an email. And a little side note, our code enforcement officer his sergeant was there, his sergeant, right?
Yes, Sergeant Jason Stibbert.
Yeah, so he said he was going to become the most hated man in his community now because he liked this so much. He's going to go back to his next HOA meeting and challenge the entire president and vice president of the HOA people and say, you're going to do one of these so that we can let you know what we think is important in our community. So he immediately felt like he's going to be not liked anymore.
I think it'll be very beneficial to everyone whenever some of these problems are resolved and we're not having to make constant phone calls to complain.
Yeah, absolutely.
I promised Laura that once this thing got implemented, her phone would never ring again.
I like it.
That's a good one.
She'll forward the calls to you.
Yeah, but I like it. That's beautiful.
Mr. Reefer, thank you. This is
Thank you.
a very
Great.
good report. Any other comments before we move on? No? All right, so now we are up to number 6, discussion of 805 Harbor Drive tree inspection and current tree codes placed on the agenda by Councilmember Bankert. Frank, take it away.
Believe it's actually 804 Arbor Drive. I brought this up at the last council meeting. I would like to see this council direct the city manager to enforce section 2234 duty of property owners when it speaks in section B about trees and hedges encroaching or otherwise affecting any neighboring properties, which this tree that I've hammered continuously to council for the last probably 5 to 6 months is doing so, with the residents actually presenting costs and damage that this tree occurred on his property or from this tree that occurred on his property. 22.31 of the definitions clearly says danger of falling adjacent properties on the right of way of any tree that interferes with utility services. There's utility services on here. We've had now 2 reports from an arborist that this tree is going to fail. Well, I don't know what the holdup is what I'm saying.
Actually, I disagree. The latest arborist report said it is in no danger of failing. Can you point out where you see it's on
I
that
don't
second
have-
arborist
I
report?
believe at the end of that, I don't have that. I'm traveling this week and I don't have that with me. But I sent one from Alan Mayberry, who does Clearwaters. He went out and inspected the tree. I believe that last report actually does say that it's going to fail.
Yeah, if I could, the actual quote is here, and this is not cherry picking people, but the quote is: "The likelihood of failure for the limbs is improbable in normal weather conditions for the inspection period timeframe of 1 year. The overall risk rating for this tree is moderate on a scale of low, moderate, high, and extreme. Consequences of failure are severe, and the likelihood of failure and impact is somewhat likely in weather conditions that are typical in the area." And again, it doesn't apply in severe weather, but the key again is they said it's moderate and likely failure for limbs is improbable. We also have to remember that this is not that person's property. Yeah, I have too looked at it. Given that second report from somebody that we contracted is so different from the one that was contracted from one of the neighbors, we really need to at least bring in the owner of the property. And
I've
that
asked
is
that,
critical
Mike,
in all
repeatedly.
statements.
Mike, I asked our council to direct our city attorney to write a strong letter about that. That failed, and I was told we couldn't do anything like that. And then the next month was brought up at a council meeting that we should be doing something about this or do an inspection on all the trees. But you just read the letter about consequence of severe failure or something in that letter, which I don't have.
That's the actual report
Yes.
from
Now-
Farmscape Services.
Now, the actual report that you have in front of you, okay, was done by a visual in the easement. Mr. Mayberry did it right on site, knocked on the, had a tree sounding device, went out there and addressed the trees. and trunk, and he says it's only a matter of time of failure. So you have one that that more or less sustained Mr. Mayberry's findings, that did it 10 feet from the site. And then you have another one from a well-defined arborist who says this tree will fail. Now, our code clearly says danger of falling on adjacent property or trees that become hazardous to neighboring properties. You were there when that citizen brought up the damage that was pulled from that tree. All right. What more do you need?
Mr. Reefler, would you like to comment on this?
Yes, going back, I do recall the first report, that report was, I guess solicited by a resident in the area, and they did go on some private property, and the reason for doing the second report was that I was looking for an objective report from a tree contractor that I selected, and to get a take of something that we could use to prove if there was a violation or not. And I wanted, when I got the report back, to the best of his ability, which was a level 1, assessment, based on what the property he could go to, that's the extent of what we could do. And that's the extent of what we could do to any tree that's on private property in the city. And I got this report back, and based on this report, and I took the terms that were used in the report from the ISA manual and how they put together these assessments. And under the tree defects, it says the likelihood of failure is improbable, and that's with the crowns and branches. So there's no problem there. When we get to the trunk, which is the main concern, it reached a 2 out of 4, which is, it's possible. And when we're talking about failure, you got the improbable, you got possible, you got probable, and you got imminent. And when we're talking about failure, and then we're looking back at our code, and it defines a hazardous tree, it says shall mean any tree that is injured, terminally diseased, or dead. So we know it's injured. We can't prove it's terminally diseased based on our report. But then it says, and in danger of falling on adjacent property. When you go back to the report, and he says that, the consequence of failure is severe, and that the likelihood of impact on the target area is high. Those are, they're 4 out of 4s, but that is talking about pretty much any tree in the city would be ranked that, just based on the location of the city, how densely populated we are. So I just wanted to put that in perspective. It is capable of falling on adjacent property or right away, but that doesn't mean that it's in danger, because we're talking about failure. So in summary, what I'm trying to say is, by looking at his report, looking at the terminology, the way he wrote it up, I'm not seeing that closer to the imminent danger that I would like if I was going to enforce our code for a violation.
Thank you very much. Mr. Moore, do you have any comments on this? Now, I'll tell you what, I'm gonna hold your thoughts for 1 second. Let's take about 3 minutes, because I see people fidgeting
Yeah,
around.
I have a question though. I do need to take a break, but then I want to, before Randy speaks up, I want to
Okay.
ask a question.
When we sat down here, is there,
Take 5.
when we sat down here, is there information here about the tree?
There's nothing about the tree.
Was that in the original packet?
No,
That was from previous.
yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay.
I don't have any tree information about them. I forgot to bring my stuff. from
Oh,
the last
okay, me too.
council meeting.
Okay,
Yeah.
good.
All right, we're back. Now, Mr. Mora, you were about to make
Deferring to
some
Jody
comments.
Shirley is what I was. doing.
Council member or Vice Mayor Shirley had a comment first.
Yeah, I just have a question. Is the tree standing today?
Yes,
Okay, so we've been through two major storms. That report says that it may have consequences in a major storm. I don't remember the exact verbiage you just used, but the tree's still standing. So chances are the tree is not a problem. It doesn't, it doesn't have a health issue because there were trees in my neighborhood that fell over. Palm trees, maybe a little
With the
different
most recent
circumstance.
storm?
Yes,
Oh, yeah.
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 And lots of palm fronds all over the
Yeah.
place. So I think the palm trees are a greater risk of causing damage than this tree. One and two, I have a problem with us considering going on private property and removing a tree without owner authorization. So I'm just had to say those two things before we heard from Randy. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Shirley. Mr. Mora.
So I think there's a fundamental misunderstanding as to what is and is not occurring. Maybe perhaps I can resolve it. Your city manager is tasked with enforcing your code. Your city manager read to you the definition of a hazardous tree and said it shall mean any tree that is injured, terminally diseased, or dead, and in danger of falling on adjacent property or the right of way. And has said that his interpretation says that in danger is not necessarily the same mean as capable, because capable would mean any tree could, just based on your property lines, most trees are capable of falling towards one property line or another. Your issue is not one of your code, in as much as when we tabled this discussion or said, let's move it to a workshop, it was, well, let's talk about what our code needs. If your code was to do anything, I think that would be, if you wish to change the definition of hazardous tree to have certain objective criteria grounded in the terminology arborists use, that might get us to less of a debate on one or more people feeling it is a hazardous tree, one or more people feeling it isn't. And ultimately, what you have here is your manager's looked at your code and says, I see this. I hear people's concerns. I'm not saying there's no concern. He doesn't believe that it is a violation of your code as your code is written. And he is unwilling to prosecute it at this time based on his discretion alone. If you wish for it to be adjudicated, you could either change your code and say, well, it does not just to meet this one tree, but in a way that will capture future instances. While I advise against it, if you wish to tell him we would like to see this matter as a body, we'd like to see this prosecuted and let the magistrate decide if it is or isn't. I advise against giving him that kind of direction, because then we start to get into what your role is in the enforcement side. And that's, again, I have my advice. You guys do what you wish. There was another question in there. So to be clear, Manager Riefler's not saying your code doesn't make sense to me. He's saying I don't think it. I don't think it's a violation. In as much as we're talking about going on private property, that's not that at least from where I'm sitting, that would not be the process at first. Now you're giving them notice. They have an opportunity to challenge it. You would go to the magistrate, find that it is in fact a hazardous tree. If it was prosecuted, it would not be, he deems it in a violation. And on Monday and on Tuesday, we're out there with trucks. It is their property. They are entitled to due process rights, and their property rights being veiled. And if they wish to proceed and defend, that's something else. The other thing that's sort of being lost in this conversation, and I've not researched it because it's not my client, not my role, is the private property owners potentially having their own causes of action and their own private recourse outside of the city's code enforcement regime, if they so wish to pursue that. And that would be for them to determine. I don't know, but right now, mostly what we have is a private property dispute absent your enforcement official finding a violation worth prosecuting.
And I went with Kyle. We spoke to the surrounding homeowners. We did not approach the tree. We stood on public property, the street, and we observed, yes, it's ugly at the base. The top was green. The tree was standing firm. It looked like there were some roots that were exposed, but I I think Kyle and I both determined that we did not have the mechanism in place to actually inspect the tree to determine if there was anything beyond, it's just an ugly tree that's big and scary. And that's kind of where we were left.
In an ordinary code enforcement, typically you don't have absent consent or some other exigency, you don't have the ability to enter on private property in code enforcement. You can get inspection warrants, and that those have been needed even in hoarder house situations and the like, where you go to the court and say, nobody seems to have been here for 20 years. There's rats, there's all this, but we want to go in. We know that we can tell from the street it's not being kept, but we want to go substantiate our violation. You get an inspection warrant from the court. So I don't want to suggest to you that there's no way. I don't know that the court would give its stat on this, but if that's the desire of the administration, that's something we can pursue.
Another item that we discussed was the possibility of the city approaching the homeowner and saying, hey, we would like to take it down. But then we were afraid it would be setting a precedence to everyone who had a crappy tree in their yard. And why aren't you cutting my tree down? And so you want to treat everybody fairly and equally. And we just never could come up with a good solution for this tree that may or may not be problematic. As Vice Mayor Shirley stated, it's now survived 2 major storms and did not come down. Yes, it's ugly, and just like any other tree, it's going to shed in high winds. And I think that that's what's happening. It's up high, it starts shedding whenever the wind blows, and it lands on bird cages and causes problems. I don't have a solution for it. And I don't think anyone here does. Mr. Bankard is asking that we, in fact, his hand is raised. Mr. Bankard.
Yeah, I have to disagree with it. You, Mr. Mayor, and the Vice Mayor, that we didn't just survive 2 major storms. We were blessed that that one major storm bypassed us, where we only had winds of maybe 40 or 50 miles an hour. The last storm, by the time it hit us, I think the top winds were under 50. And I was able to pull up the letter because I did email it to one of the residents when I got it. I want to read this. The overall risk rating for this tree is moderate on a scale of low, moderate, high, and extreme. The consequences of failure are severe, and the likelihood of failure and impact is somewhat likely in weather conditions that are typical in the area. The risk rating does not apply in severe weather such as hurricanes. We haven't had a hurricane force wind in this area, okay? So we thank God we haven't, all right? But again, going back to the code of ordinances, we have, I believe, every right under 2231 and 2234 to notify that owner that there's a possible violation, that this tree needs to be addressed. And I think if the owner got that letter, they would do something.
Council.
Frank, wasn't it at the last meeting? Was it the fire chief that was talking about they removed a tree, and you were asking him, how did they do that?
Yes.
What was his answer? I don't remember.
They said it was leaning towards the roadway.
Okay.
Now, this one's leaning towards the easement, which our code completely says easement. I think a strong letter from our city attorney is a remedy that would probably resolve this.
I don't think our city attorney should be writing a letter. I mean, this is a code issue.
I'll tell you, it's not without precedent to write a, hey, would you be a good neighbor letter and say your tree has been the topic of conversation. It's a fact that this tree has been the topic of conversation at more than one public meeting. It's a fact that members of the community have expressed some consternation about it. We can write and say, you know, while our codes have this and we reserve the right to enforce our code, which we do. If if Kyle's conclusions change based on new information, if a new manager comes in and reaches a different conclusion, it's not beyond stating that those things are true. It's not a notice of violation. It's not a, we're taking you to the magistrate. It's a, hey, this is taking some of our time and taking some of our time and resources. Care to do it. It's my understanding this is owned by an LLC. That doesn't change anything. It just changes, you know, if correspondence was sent, it would go to a registered agent or, you know, and whether that registered agent is passing it along to a homeowner, I don't know.
I know I asked this question before. Has anyone reached out to the homeowner or the property owner? It's vacant property, correct? Am I saying that?
Unimproved property
Yeah.
with the, you know, with the tree.
So that property owner has been approached by a lot of, well, I should say several of the neighbors about the tree. Over time, some feelings have changed just based on recommendations and things. So there's history and before city manager Reeves left, they did send a notice of violation for an Australian pine. And then when it got brought to my attention, I discovered that it was not an Australian pine. And that's kind of where that got left off.
So that was for an invasive species, not a
Yes.
hazardous tree.
Right.
So this is not an invasive species.
It is not.
Okay.
No. There is an example of a community that has determined that Norfolk Island pine is a nuisance species. That's something you could consider, but you do have a lot of other Norfolk Island pines
Okay.
in the city.
I would like to ask you, Mr. Riefler, to try again to contact the owner of the property and explain, just like Mr. Moore said, that, okay, it's becoming a perpetual topic and see if you can work something out with him. I don't know what that would be because no matter what, we would be picking up the tab on this, and that's not the goal. The goal is not for us to pay for the tree removal. It's not a decision I can make, and something that I guess the council would have to agree upon, or you would have to take it upon yourself to do it. And even then, I don't know if that would fly well with this council.
Mhm.
So there has to be a solution some way or another that we can. Is there do you have a name, a phone number, an
I do.
address? Okay,
I've corresponded with this resident.
There.
yes,
And one of the top issues on the code enforcement thing was hazardous trees. And I understand there are several other trees throughout the city that are, you know, potentially hazardous. And I think this could be something that we could get our code enforcement guys to go out and, shall I say, survey and figure out, you know, which trees have problems, which ones don't. And then so if we treat all of the tree owners the same, it puts us in a much stronger position than just focusing on this one tree.
unfortunately, this one tree has been in focus for such a long time that
Well, that doesn't mean, it doesn't mean we can't, you know,
I mean-
incorporate the other trees. They have,
On that point, if you look at these Norfolk Island pines, this is the tree we're talking about.
Yeah.
A lot of them, they do lean, but they self-correct.
Mhm.
I don't know. Councilor, Member Baker, can you see?
That-
But I went around and, there's some different examples, throughout the city and, they, like this one is an extreme. You've probably seen it. That one's not self-correcting. It's got a pretty significant lean to it.
that's a good tree.
Well, that's not a tree that's in question, but it exists.
Oh, but I mean, that's considered a good tree.
I would say so. I mean, I can have an assessment done on it, but what I'm trying to say is. If we want to be fair, we want to be more aggressive about it. I think we need to have a method of doing so. But I think based on our current definition and what a professional ISA person can give us. I can't draw that conclusion to say it's a hazardous tree.
it pains me to not be able to address the residents' issues that surround this tree. But I just don't think that we have one at this time. Yes, Mr. Roberts.
I wonder, so just off the top of your head, how many homeowners in that area have expressed unhappiness about that tree? How many different homes? Two,
Mm.
three?
3 or 4.
Oh, really? Okay. So that's good. That's good news. I think just taking a guess, I mean, we could get some bids or they could get some bids from a tree company and perhaps the homeowners there could say, look, we'll each kick in $100 to take this tree down. Or do you think there's any love for that tree by the property owner?
No, I don't think that's it at all. I think that there's actually what's the best way to say it? The neighbors don't like each other.
Okay.
So
Yeah, there's
so the
history.
surrounding neighbors, it's the surrounding neighbors against the tree owner.
Got it.
And I think that several residents have, Frank, correct me if I'm wrong, but haven't they offered to pay to remove the tree
Okay.
and he wouldn't allow it?
I'm not sure if they offered to pay the whole nut, but I know there was an offer there and he got indignant. It's just, it's like I said, it's an LLC. The mother hasn't been addressed. The son who manages the LLC, I think has been addressed. He's been the sticking point of this whole thing. But I commend you, Mr. Mayor, from now taking this to another possible level, maybe getting Mr. Moore to do a good neighbor letter or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, I would say just let's start with a contact. And if it's helpful, if you want me to reach out also, I'll be more than happy to do that, just as a friendly courtesy call.
I'll start by reaching out, and I can find out, feel him out on what different options he would consider.
Good.
Good. Does that satisfy you with this conversation, Mr. Bankert?
I thank you, Mr. Mayor, for it.
All right, so let's move on to number 7, also placed on the agenda by Councilmember Bankert, a discussion of buoys installed and maintained at Bel Air Shore beach accesses. Mr.
Yeah.
Bankert, you're up.
Thank you. This is just basically a continuance of last year's council approval. It was passed 6-1. And all this does is complement what is just passed on the council's agenda last month, providing buoys from 19th Street to Harrison. My request is, and I addressed council, I addressed Bel Air Shores last year. The mayor seemed very acceptable to it, but he was hesitant on possible cost, even though council last year said that we would pay for 3 to 5 buoys. He was concerned about where the buoys would go because he said it would be better if we knew where they were going. Their attorney didn't know there was an interlocal agreement. It's still in place that would protect Bel Air Shores and Bel Air Beach. I understand an ordinance would have to be changed, but what I'm asking this council to do is, if Bel Air Shores agrees to changing their ordinance, that we place the buoys that are noted in my request tonight at 3rd, 6th, I believe, and 9th, 12th, and 15th Street.
Now, just to clarify, who would be responsible for ongoing maintenance?
In the interlocal agreement that was created in I think December of 2000, Bel Air Beach was the administrator of the entire buoys, from placement to maintenance to renewing the permits. And that was from 1st Street down to Harrison. That actually covered 33 buoys. I actually sent 3 documents, but Patty never got them. I don't know if she forwarded them to you guys tonight or before she left.
We have them.
Okay. And in that interlocal agreement and buoy permit 01210, it clearly states that Bel Air Beach does the maintenance on them. And always has.
So if the if the town of Bel Air Shore was to agree with this, does the council agree with purchasing and maintaining buoys on Bel Air Shore? I guess that's the question.
I think the question is maybe we're premature at this point. We have not received the formal approval of our buoy situation from FWC. That's one. Number two, we directed that our beaches will be provided the buoys. They have not. I would say they'd be on their own for costs on this one because they have to, under home rule, they have to decide what they want done with their beaches.
Absolutely. And that's what I was stating was if they agreed with it, is that the wishes of this council, if they agreed to let us pick up the tab on placing buoys up and down their beach. Does this council, are you interested in that at all?
I don't want to pick up costs for Bel Air Shores on this one.
The agreement says that we are paying the maintenance equally. The cost of all maintenance, whether provided by the city or by separate contract, shall be borne equally by the city and town. So the interlocal agreement says maintenance is paid by both entities.
Okay, well, that may very well change the possibility of that even happening. I think what may have frightened them off the last time this was discussed was the fact that they would be facing permanent maintenance fees on buoys that they may not have necessarily wanted in the first place. Mr. Roberts,
So you're saying there was a time where they didn't want buoys?
I think that they did not want them replaced.
Okay, all right. Well, my first thought was, if we did this, personally, I would try to use this. I know there's things that are being discussed regarding the infamous umbrella world. If we could use this as a bargaining chip, that's how I would approach them. And I think it might, because I've heard through the grapevine often that, they're reluctant now to do anything about releasing or changing the umbrella ordinance because that would admit they were wrong and that could impact the lawsuits. However, if they were to say something like, well, we did change the umbrella rules, and the reason we did that because we entered into an interlocal agreement with a Bel Air Beach, and they assisted us in providing buoys, and that's really the reason we decided to change it.
So let
Type of a deal.
me give you some information on that. As far as connecting the buoys to the umbrellas, I don't think that's necessary. And
Okay.
the reason why is because they've already had their first reading of bringing umbrellas back to the accesses.
There we
So
go.
on December the 6th, they're supposed to have the second reading of that. And then it becomes law. And now you can once again have umbrellas in the
At those access. points.
access areas. So I would,
That's a big help.
I don't think that that's necessary, but your
Okay.
thoughts on buoys, is us providing buoys and possibly splitting maintenance?
Yeah. I don't think so.
If we just put a buoy like at each of their three accesses, at each of the accesses, rather than all the way up
What
and
is
down
that?
the beach.
19, 12, 6.
How many accesses are there?
Parking accesses, there's 3, 19, 12, 6.
I think that whatever,
First 19,
Mr. Baker, did you actually have a map in your documentation showing where the buoys were supposed to be placed?
No,
In the permit number 1, there's a map, but for clarification, there is already a buoy at 17th, 18th Street of Bel Air Shores. We would be putting one anyway at 19th Street at the beach access. So the councilwoman's question about putting one at 6th Street and 9th Street, which would be or 12th Street, I'm sorry, which would be the only other 2 access points. The problem here is we're protecting the citizens from 19th Street north, but the citizens from 1st Street to 19th Street And if you research the Bel Air Shores minutes, there have been citizens that have gotten up and asked about buoy replacement using pennies for Pinellas to do it. And they said the money's already been spent for underground lighting. I've talked to a couple residents that live in Bel Air Shores that are very annoyed of the jet skis coming in real close to the shoreline. They're saying that we should have the buoys back and we should pay for them, not Bel Air Beach, but Bel Air Shores. But I'm thinking, be a good neighbor, get everything back on track. 5 buoys isn't going to cost us a lot of money. And it would protect the citizens from First and 19th Street, which I'm the only council member that lives in that area.
What is the cost approximately, Kyle, for a buoy?
A little over 200.
$200?
Yeah.
Okay.
Is that installed?
No,
Yeah, I didn't think so.
Just the
How
order.
much to install?
Plus-
Couple hundred more?
depends how many you do at one time. It's cheaper if you doing a lot.
Chain hasps.
So how many additional buoys would we add to our beach
I-
buoys?
I went out today and GIS located what's left on our side of the beach, and it's like 5.5, because there's one that's like full water or something that's halfway floating. At this point, I believe they're over 3 years old. I recommend that we replace them all, because if that many have gone, the rest got to be close. And that way we're not worried about trying to resticker an old buoy. So right now, I'd say to come into compliance with our new ordinance, which I'm working with the FWC to make sure they're on board with everything I'm doing. The language and all that, the buoys, we need at least 16 for what we committed to.
16 for us.
Yes.
Okay. And then how many for Bel Air Beach if we went along with that?
We keep the same distance if you're gonna go all the way down to 28th Avenue or whatever. I'd say about 16. I mean, with the relative distance, I'd have to Google Earth it to know for
Okay.
sure. I want to say
16
it was
more?
about roughly the same amount when the original permit was done. It was in the 30s. Maybe 28. I'd have to check.
The way the ordinance goes, we can't just put them at the parking lots or at the accesses. They have to be all the
Well-
way to the beach.
Well, they have to get their own permit.
They,
right?
they
I
would
mean, I
also
agree
have
to
to get
make
their
it a swim
ordinance in
beach.
compliance.
They have to.
With,
Yeah.
because their ordinance isn't changed like ours is.
With what I know that at one time there was a joint, something to do with permitting was done jointly or something in the past. And now we're having to do it on our own, which means they're going to have to do it on their own also.
Correct. And having reviewed in preparation for this meeting, having reviewed minutes and some of which have even been provided here. As of roughly a year ago, they had no intention of reestablishing buoys.
And that was my,
Of course, that can change board to board, but they're not in any present discussions to reestablish buoys, pursue permitting, and understanding that this entire conversation is predicated on their pursuit of them, or potential pursuit of them. There's not a present pursuit of buoys by Bel Air Shores, such that this is necessarily timely in that way, that we need to let them know as they're debating it. Maybe it'll push them over. They're not debating it at present.
yeah, and that's kind of what I got out of a couple of conversations. One of them at the end of the meeting, whenever Frank made his presentation, just listening to the commission, I think that they may have been on board until they were considering maintenance fees and upkeep. And then it seemed as if it just slipped their minds and they were no longer interested.
Mhm.
And we have the same issue with the condominium owners. They look out back, they don't want to see the buoys. So it makes perfect sense why they would not want the buoys. But I don't have a problem reaching out to a couple of the commissioners and see what they have to say about it if they're interested. I don't mind doing that, Frank. And then at the next meeting, I'll let you know what they say. I don't know what else to do right now.
I much appreciate it, Mr. Mayor.
So step one would be for them to apply for a permit.
Well,
If they were
I think to
interested.
begin with is just to determine if they're even interested.
Okay.
Because they're, I have a feeling they're not. But let's see. And we'll just go that route. I do understand the need. Why you want them on the south side. It makes perfect sense. And it's just a matter of getting both sides to agree to make it happen.
Thank you much.
All right. Now we're on to item 8, which is general business. Do we have any general business? Anything? Yes.
Sure. We all received an email today. I mean, this is going back to, are we responsive? Dan, right? We are. Yoli had sent an email to Kyle to forward to everybody. And I just wanted to say, Kyle, can you please answer her about, what did the city do? I guess as regarding the easement, 18th, 19th Street, about who turned that over? You know, just give her an answer, copy us if you possible. I mean, you saw the email.
From when Lynn was here and he looked into it, I don't think he ever got the answer of why that easement stopped. Right at that property at 18th. I don't know if I can find that answer. I can try.
I can tell you, Lynn told me, because it was a hot topic at one point, and he did some research and could not find any proof, any surveys that indicated that the easement went beyond 18th. And so I don't know if I fully believe that. I don't know if it just got lost. I think there's probably a way to track it with just getting an engineer involved to look at the history of the lots there, you know, before that house was built.
I was involved with because the surveys are very old and they were hand drawn. And I do remember him reaching out to the original surveyor and trying to pursue it from some of those documents. Outside of going through the records room and just thumbing through everything.
Yeah,
I
there was an
don't-
old time resident that was on council that said there was definitely some
So-
concern about whether or not that easement was there before or not, and had Lynn digging through.
So they
archives.
believed that it was there at some point.
He believes it was, and Lynn said it wasn't, so I don't know. And I think that was one of those things that person went away and no longer was pursued. I asked the question and I was told that no, that there was no documentation of us ever having that easement going through to 19.
Do we still have the reach back with
18th,
the
excuse me.
former city manager?
What's that?
Do we still have that reach back portion of the contract? Yeah.
Anyone can pick up their phone and
Yeah.
call Lynn Reeves.
Okay.
It seems like the county would have,
I think
I was
if
gonna
we got really aggressive, we could look back at some archives and go to the county and pull, you know, old plats and that type of thing.
have we tried that?
I'll reach out to Lynn, see what
This
he
is
has.
just
and
something
try it,
that-
But that's worth a shot. I was thinking, possibly going through the old records. If there's an
Something that
easement, it
was
should have
brought
been
up today,
recorded.
right?
Yes.
It's, I've not lived here for a long time, but it seems like it opens up and then it closes up and it opens up and it closes up. And it depends upon what the current landscape is or possibly who the latest owner is. But it seems like it changes, from time to time. You'll see a picket fence and then you won't see one.
Oh, no, on this,
So-
it's their
Flat out.
yard. I cut
Landscape.
through it sometimes. right?
It,
You have to go in one gate, not the other gate. It's a gated.
Lynn was successful at getting everybody's permanent fence structures outside of it, except for there's one left. And I thought Lynn said that they were all gone, but there's definitely one between, I think, 16th and 17th where the fence is in the easement. And I wanted to make you aware of that. And I don't know if it's something we want to still pursue.
Is it
Getting-
16th and 17th, or is it the one that?
It's right up near there.
that Yoli sent us the
Yoli said it was like
I thought she
18.
said
I-
18th and
18th.
19th.
It's the connector to the north side of town, right?
That's
So
where we don't
we
know
can't
if the easement
access it.
exists. That's the piece we don't know if there actually was
Right.
an easement, but there is, where we know there's an easement, there is a fence that's encroaching it.
Oh, there is.
There still is.
And that's what I want to make sure that what happened between 18th and 19th doesn't happen anywhere else, that easement is always open, because
Hmm.
we can't have these
Well, that's
pieces.
one
taken off
house that's there, right?
One house.
That you,
yes.
that they can access, but from, okay, I know that is, yeah.
And my understanding
Sometimes I
is,
get halfway through and the other gate's locked and I have to go back.
It's all.
And then somebody shoots.
Attorney Mora,
Yeah.
my understanding is an easement is in perpetuity. It never,
It depends on the instrument that it's based on. Prescriptive easements, meaning easements achieved by adverse possession, which we're not talking about here, would be sort of different. But if we have an easement, it would depend on how it was dedicated, if it's a written easement, what the easement documents say. Not all easements are in perpetuity, no. I don't know if this was done. Basically, we may
It was
also
a
be able
long
to do a
time ago.
title search.
Yeah,
But I have a feeling that if it's not coming up more readily in digital reviews of records, that a title search probably won't find what was, handwritten on graph paper 60 years ago.
Hmm.
But ultimately, I defer to you folks, but as a general matter, no, not all easements are in perpetuity.
While we're discussing easements, how is the survey going? How many have you had?
we're
Turn.
doing very well. We're getting close to 200, so we're almost twice as much as.
Wow, all right.
Just for the walking easement?
Mhm.
This is the walking easement. Now, it was a shorter survey, but they did go boots on the ground and went to every door. So I think that did make a difference.
And are you keeping tabs to date or are you waiting till you get?
I purposely have not looked at any of the results. I was just gonna wait for the thing to close. People have kind of asked me, but I can't keep daily tabs on what the results coming in. I'd rather just be able to summarize all the data.
And is the cut date on receiving them?
The close of the month. So
All right.
November 30th is the expiration.
And so when will we have the results?
I could share them with you immediately if you're interested.
Great.
It won't be my, it's the three questions, but I can, I'll put it in an Excel format, sort of like I did with this one, and just send it out to you.
Are they going to be in quadrants?
We could do that eventually.
I know, I took that survey to, I had to hand them off on Harrison, and one of the neighbors goes, walking path. In my day, that was called a sidewalk. Is that what you're talking about? I said, Not quite.
I want to pay.
All right. Well, any other general business? Mr. Baker, your hand was raised?
Yeah, if we end up doing the blacktop on these easements, is there, I haven't seen a blueprint on it, I just saw it was 10 foot wide. Is there going to be drainage in there? Because right now, I'm just talking from 9th Street south. When you get a high tide, that easement floods in a lot of areas, especially if the check valve isn't working. So because now we're going to be blacktopping 10 feet of ground, which water absorption will be deterrent from that 10 feet. So how are we going to drain it is what I'm asking.
I'm gonna step in on this one. I don't think that's the result of the survey. We're relying on the survey to find out what everyone wants us to do with these easements. And it may very well be that we don't do anything with them, or we throw shells down or something, my guess would be no blacktop, but I don't know. We'll find out in a couple of days, and then we can have that conversation.
Thank you again.
I'm sorry, what was that?
Thank you.
I said thank you again. I'm sorry.
Oh, no problem, no problem. Any other general business? Everyone want to go home?
Can I just mention really quick, you guys did not see the September financial report. Heather wanted to hold and deliver it with the next month's with the October report, just because it's the end of the fiscal year and she wanted the numbers to come out a little more accurate to wrap it up. So I just want to make you aware we didn't forget.
Thanks for the heads up on that.
Yeah.
I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion.
Second,
Second.
all in favor?
Bye.
Good night.
Nice.
Good job.